Good morning, and welcome to today's New York City Council hearing for the Committee on Governmental Operations. If you would like to testify, you must fill out a witness slip with one of the Sergeant at Arms. You may submit testimony at testimony@council.nyc.gov. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. No one may approach the dais at any time during this hearing. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Thank you so much. My name is Lincoln Ressler, and I got to do the finger. There you go. It's now official. I'm Lincoln Ressler. I am the privilege of chairing the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation. It's a special morning because we get to welcome Frank Morano to the Government Operations Committee. Thank you for joining us, Frank. Newly appointed.
Thank you.
He's already distinguished himself as somebody who's really committed to government reform, and look forward to having you on this committee and partnering together on many good and worthy initiatives. I'd also like to recognize Brooklyn's own Councilmember David Carr, and Councilmember Sandy Nurse is visiting with us this morning as she has a great new bill. We're holding an oversight hearing on sustainability in city government. Our city government is the largest property owner and the largest employer in the city of New York. So it is imperative that city government lead the way on emissions reductions and hold ourselves accountable to ambitious deadlines to meet the existential challenge of climate change. With thousands of buildings, hundreds of millions of square feet of real estate, nearly 30,000 vehicles, wastewater facilities, and more, our government is the single largest entity responsible for emissions in New York City. Since 2006, the city has been working to reduce those emissions. Our original goal was to achieve a 30% reduction by 2017. Local Law 97 later updated those targets with a mandate to achieve a 40% reduction by 2025 and a 50% reduction by 2030. As the city's landlord and back-end support agency, DCAS is the agency responsible for ensuring we meet these emission reduction goals. In 2021, at the very height of COVID, DCAS released a detailed action plan on how we would achieve the 25 target and significantly exceed the 2030 target. It laid out $4 billion in investments that would help us retrofit buildings, achieve cleaner energy supply, and electrify our fleet. Unfortunately, the Adams administration has failed to achieve those goals. DCAS informed the council in late 2023 that we would not meet our 40% reduction target by 2025, instead delaying it to FY27. Local Law 97 laid out ambitious climate targets for private buildings. And just as we are minimizing delays and exceptions for the private sector, we must hold the public sector to an even higher standard. The city also has a critical role to play in helping to advance innovation in the marketplace and leverage its significant buying power to make it more affordable for the private sector to meet their targets. This is not a bureaucratic exercise. As the federal government continues to use climate change denialism to roll back environmental protections and temperatures keep rising rapidly, the leadership roles cities must play in reducing emissions has become even more important. Delays have real impacts on childhood asthma rates that keep rising, on poor air quality in our neighborhoods, and so much more. Yet the city is 110,000 metric tons behind, the equivalent of 24,000 cars on the road, in achieving our goals. As we look ahead to a new administration taking over in just 65 days, but who's counting, I hope we can gain a better understanding today of what progress we've made to date and what needs to be done to get back on track. We are hearing 3 bills under the Governmental Operations Committee today. Intro 1038, sponsored by Councilmember Nurse, will require DCAS to create a master plan for the redevelopment of Rikers Island. The Council passed the Renewable Rikers Act back in 2021 to require DCAS to plan for future sustainability and resiliency uses of Rikers. The city issued a comprehensive feasibility study back in 2024, but unfortunately, has since appeared to discontinue all planning and forward momentum. The closure of Rikers is indeed imperative and fast approaching, and it's short-sighted to stall planning for a massive redevelopment legislation and her leadership on this, and I'm eager to help move it forward within the City Council. Intro 1378, sponsored by Councilmember Felice, will require DCAS to report on the use of vacant space in city buildings. DCAS manages over 50 buildings and hundreds of leases across the city, and this legislation will ensure elected officials and communities have more clarity on underused space in their neighborhoods so we can work together to put it to good use. And lastly, Intro 551, which will be for a later panel, is sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannon. This will establish a day fines pilot program in the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, OATH. OATH serves as the city's administrative law court and is responsible for processing all summons issued. From now from not putting out your trash properly to civil summons from NYPD for things like day drinking or littering in the park. Last year, Oath processed 1,105,000 summons. That's a summons for 1 in 8 New Yorkers. The number of summons annually has doubled since Eric Adams took office and keeps increasing every single year. And the city is currently owed over $1 billion in unpaid fines. It's clear the current system isn't working. It's not deterring behavior, bad behavior, and unpaid debt can cause significant hardship for New Yorkers that are already struggling to get by. Intro 551 would establish a day fines pilot requiring New Yorkers to pay a percentage of their income. Day fine systems in Europe and pilots in the United States, including, I believe, in Staten Island, for my colleagues to my left, or to my right, but to my left right now, have been successful in increasing payment rates and decreasing summons. I am hopeful that the next administration will finally work collaboratively with the council to try this out in New York City. With that, I want to thank the governmental operations staff, our new committee counsel, welcome to Jahari Frazier, policy analyst Erica Cohen, who led the preparations for this hearing, the finance unit head, Julia Haramis, who always does a phenomenal job, for all of their work collectively in preparing for this hearing, as well as my great team, my communications director, Neve Mooney, who's amazing, and my chief of staff, Molly Haley, who is the best of the best. With that, I will turn it over to Councilmember 1038.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to speak too long because I'm losing my voice. Liberty of looking at your testimony, it seems like we have the studies. We know there's viability for a vision for renewable Rikers, and I think we just want to see a forward motion on it. I don't think we want to be caught flat-footed 11th hour trying to come up with a plan. And additionally, we want to put some resources to the plan. And so I think that's why this bill is really important, to compel the resources to come along with the planning. And there's just been too much musing about not doing Rikers. We are locked in. We are moving forward. And I think solidifying a plan would really just put the nail in the coffin for anybody who thinks we're doing anything else. I just want to also thank DCAS for working on Local Law 99 on the public solar. I'm hoping we can get the public clean energy storage also potentially over the finish line this year and work with you all on achieving that. But thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation around this, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Nurse. I will now invite committee counsel to swear in our distinguished panel, and I just want to thank Commissioner Molina himself for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, and your whole team. My last 3 governmental operations committee meetings have been boycotted by the administration, so we're very happy to have you. Thank you for being here.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Yes. We may begin whenever you're ready.
Great, go ahead. Thank you, Commissioner.
Good morning, Chair Ressler and members of the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation. My name is Louis Molina. I'm the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services, also known as DCAS. I'm joined by Deputy Commissioner for Energy Management, Sana Barakat, Assistant Commissioner Stephen Caputo, and Assistant Commissioner for Real Estate Services, Matthew Burke. Thank you for inviting us to testify today. Local Law 97 established one of the most ambitious greenhouse gas reduction frameworks in the country, requiring the City of New York to lead by example and reduce emissions from government operations faster than the private sector. With this front of mind, we have reduced greenhouse gas emissions from city operations by 26% through fiscal year 23, compared to our fiscal year 2006 baseline. We remain on track to exceed a 50% reduction ahead of schedule for 2030, a remarkable achievement that reflects the dedication of our teams and partners across all agencies. This progress has been the result of extraordinary citywide mobilization, one that integrates capital investment, operational efficiency, and deep collaboration between DCAS and our sister agencies. Together, we are transforming how the city powers, fuels, and manages its assets, and we are setting a model for large-scale urban decarbonization. Buildings account for roughly 70% of emissions from city government operations. In response, DCAS has led a comprehensive effort to upgrade, retrofit, decarbonize our public infrastructure. Since fiscal year 2014, we have implemented over 17,500 energy conservation measures across 2,500 city-owned buildings, achieving a reduction of more than 460,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, the same as removing over 100,000 cars from the road. These measures have generated not only environmental benefits, but also financial and community dividends. Through improved energy efficiency, we have reduced annual energy expense by $150 million per year, with more than half of all projects located in disadvantaged communities, ensuring that the benefits of cleaner, more efficient public buildings reach New Yorkers who need them most. Recently, the city completed 300 direct install lighting upgrades at schools, rapid, scalable conversions to LED lighting that yield immediate and measurable emissions reductions. Alongside these lower cost initiatives, we are also advancing comprehensive retrofits at major facilities, including the 57th Street Sanitation Garage, the Brooklyn Museum, 3 high energy use facilities operated by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. DCAS also provides grant funding for agency-led energy projects, supporting both capital and expense work that produces verifiable savings. These programs distribute tens of millions of dollars annually, and through ongoing process improvement, we've achieved an overall 93% capital commitment rate in the last fiscal year, a testament to our agency's ability to deliver results efficiently. Expanding the city's renewable energy portfolio is central to our decarbonization strategy under Local Law 99 of 2024. The city is now mandated to develop 150 megawatts of solar power on city properties by 2035, a bold target that will multiply our existing capacity nearly 5-fold. As of today, the city has installed approximately 32 megawatts of solar, with over 80% of that capacity located on public schools. Reaching the 150 megawatt goal within the next decade is ambitious, but DCAS is fully mobilized to deliver it through every feasible pathway. Equally transformative, the Champlain Hudson Power Express, also known as the Chippy Project, will provide the city with 100% renewable electricity, with anticipated completion in spring of 2026. This clean power supply will make every kilowatt consumed by our electrified buildings fully renewable, dramatically enhancing the impact of our energy and electrification efforts. Public schools represent the city's largest and most viable building portfolios. In 2022, we launched Leading the Charge initiative, committing to complete and initiate the electrification of 100 schools by 2030. To date, 33 schools are already in progress toward that goal. The initiative also sets targets for 800 school lighting upgrades and phase out the use of number 4 fueled oil, thanks to Local Law 32 of 2023, which accelerated that phase out. These school projects not only lower emissions, but also create healthier, more comfortable learning environments for our students and teachers, reinforcing the bolder civic values of decarbonization. Under Executive Order 89, the city has placed Agency Chief Decarbonization Officers, also known as ACTOs, at 8 of the highest emitting agencies. These ACTOs lead agency-level implementation, while DCAS provides dedicated energy staff positions, technical assistance, and training resources. This structure ensures sustained capacity, accountability, and alignment across city government as we deliver our climate commitments. Parallel to our work on buildings, DCAS is also driving one of the largest municipal clean fleet transitions in the country. Under NYC Clean Fleet Plan, launched in 2015, the city committed to reduce fleet greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2025 through electrification, renewable fuels, and operational efficiencies, and we have achieved this goal. We are proud to report that DCAS now operates the largest electric vehicle fleet in New York State, with 5,735 EVs currently in service and 410 additional units on order. Over 1,000 of these electric vehicles are serving law enforcement functions across 15 agencies, and more than 1,600 medium and heavy-duty electric trucks are in operation or procurement. To complement our fleet's transition to electric, we are currently operating the largest EV charging network in the state, featuring 2,356 charging ports, including 404 fast chargers and 161 solar carports. As we look ahead, we recognize that electrification is only one part of the puzzle. To advance our efforts, DCAS has also implemented the largest biofuels program on the East Coast, transitioning all city fleet trucks and off-road equipment to renewable diesel, a complete replacement for fossil fuel diesel fuel. This renewable diesel is primarily derived from used cooking oil and waste animal fats, helping reduce waste and cutting the life cycle emissions to date. The city has used over 34 million gallons of renewable diesel. This transition extends beyond road vehicles. DCAS is collaborating with the New York City Department of Transportation and other maritime agencies to power boats and ferries with renewable diesel. The Staten Island ferry fleet has fully transitioned, and other agencies are following suit. Efficiency remains central to the fleet program. Since fiscal year 2018, we have reduced the total fleet size by 2,234 vehicles, or 7%, due to fleet right-sizing and telematics initiatives launched under Executive Order 41. The city continues to operate 4,369 hybrid vehicles, including more than 1,000 new hybrid replacements for the NYPD, ensuring that at the end of fiscal year 2026, 60% of the NYPD fleet will be hybrid, electric, or powered by biofuels. Collectively, these actions have resulted in a 67% reduction in fossil fuel use, or the equivalent of 20 million gallons annually. DCAS is grateful for the Council's partnership in advancing the policies that enable this work. Legislation such as Local Law 32 of 2023 and Local Law 99 of 2024 exemplify how strong legislative direction can aid us in delivering tangible climate progress. With respect to legislation being considered today, Intro 1038 requires DCAS to lead the creation of a master plan for the redevelopment of Rikers Island for sustainability and resiliency purposes. DCAS is ready and eager to take on any new projects that will expand solar capacity or generate energy savings across a large-scale city infrastructure. We agree that a master plan will be a valuable tool for long-term planning as the city transitions to the borough-based jail system. We look forward to working with the council on ensuring the plan's requirements are structured to provide maximum value and feasibility. Intro 1378 requires DCAS to report on the use and vacancy of space in city buildings. DCAS supports the intent of this bill and shares the council goal of making data as transparent and accessible as possible. We know that much of the information is already available on the city's open data platform, and we are happy to work collaboratively to ensure data is published in the most useful ways going forward. Decarbonizing city government requires a progressive approach fueled by ingenuity, innovation, and partnership. From transforming our public buildings and schools to electrifying our vehicles and ferries, New York City is demonstrating what a government can achieve when climate action becomes an operational priority. We have reduced emissions by over a quarter since 2006 and are on track to cut them by more than half ahead of schedule. We're a building clean energy future, and while this is a marathon, we are proud of every mile marker we've passed along the way, because one solar panel, one electric vehicle, one retrofit at a time, we are making our city greener. More than that, we are saving taxpayers money, creating a healthier communities, and leading by example for cities around the world. Thank you for your partnership and continued support. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I do want to just note, I think it's clear that there are a lot of areas of significant progress, and you know, it's our role as a council to kind of ask why we weren't able to do more and how can we do more, even more moving forward. But I really do want to thank you for the thoughtful testimony. I have lots of questions, as always, so why don't I offer my colleagues the opportunity to go first, and then I'll chime in. Councilmember Marano?
Thank you. Commissioner, for starters, as someone that represents Staten Island, I want to thank you for your role in getting the Staten Island flag above City Hall. And in a borough that oftentimes feels alienated from city government, I think it sends a very important symbolic gesture to the people of my borough that we're just as much a part of the city as everybody else. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Obviously, in Staten Island, we care about sustainability, but we also care about affordability. Can DCAS quantify how much taxpayers are actually saving in dollars from the city's sustainability initiative to date?
I'd have to get back with you on quantifying the amount. We could follow up with Sheets' team on that. I thank you for your question, but I think it's important for taxpayers to know how much they're saving. if possible. So we'll work on that for you.
Thank you. According to the data that we've seen, the city's only achieved about 30% of its solar installation goal, and Staten Island lags far behind the other boroughs. In your view, why has Staten Island gotten such a small share of completed projects, and what's being done to correct that imbalance?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start off, and then Sana, you can answer in more technical terms. But I think, part of it is we've done a lot of work with our partners in New York City Public Schools to install a significant amount of solar capacity, and I think we're about at 32 megawatts of solar capacity to date citywide. I think when we look at many of our buildings do also require their roofs to be replaced before we implement solar on those buildings. So I think it goes hand in hand. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, this is great. So when we look at solar implementation, we always look at solar-ready sites. And like the commissioner said, at this point, we were focusing on sites in schools that were ready to go. However, we are in the process of, expanding the list, and I'm sure we're going to have Staten Island included in there.
Has DCAS evaluated smaller city buildings like libraries, precincts, sanitation garages, maybe for rooftop solar potential, or do we tend to limit ourselves to larger headquarters?
Yeah, no, we are looking at every possible site that's available. As you know, it's very challenging to find sites in the city, with such an urban environment. So any sites that is ready to be used for solar, we'll be looking at. So we're not limiting ourselves to anything specific.
Is there a cost-benefit analysis that shows whether these solar projects actually save more in energy cost than they cost in installation and maintenance?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Is there a cost-benefit analysis showing whether these solar projects actually save more in energy costs, meaning more money, than they cost to install and maintain?
Have that? Yeah. Let's see that.
Thanks for that question.
Sure.
It really depends on the location of the solar project and how much it costs. But for a typical solar project at schools over the lifetime of say a 20-year lifetime of the project, we're definitely saving money. Other sites that are more expensive to build, we're maybe breaking even in some cases, and particularly as we develop larger sites and look at non-rooftop sites, they're not going to be saving the city money, but we're doing it because we're mandated by Local Law 99.
And finally, we've all seen charging stations popping up around Manhattan in places like Staten Island, where police and sanitation fleets operate long routes and often in cold weather. How realistic, in your view, is full fleet electrification by 2035?
I think specifically to our sedans and light-duty vehicles, I think it's realistic. We currently do have the largest charging station network on the East Coast. We will add additional charges to that. And as we expand in more public partnerships where the public can also use that charging, that'll also be beneficial to the community as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to drill down a little bit further on what Councilmember Morano was asking about, in the Commissioner's testimony, he references the $150 million in reduced annual energy expenses that have resulted from the decarbonization efforts. Would it be possible to provide the council with a breakdown of kind of how we've saved that money and what has been attributed to it, to help provide some additional information to Councilmember Morano for how we've been able to reduce those energy expenses further?
Yes, we can.
Great. Councilmember Nurse?
Just a couple questions. I know DEP isn't here, but we imagine in the way it's written in the bill that a master plan for moving forward the vision for renewable Rikers would be working strongly with DEP, maybe even having them lead it, and MOCJ. But maybe you could talk a little bit about, from what you know, post the studies being completed, what has kind of transpired since then in terms of figuring out next steps for moving the project forward.
Okay. So we have the REACT committee, as you know. We've met 4 times already, and we're now in the process of developing the recommendations. So those really were the next step. Is what recommendations do we want to present for what renewables would be on the island?
Okay, and when do you expect to have those when do you anticipate having those recommendations finalized?
There is no specific time at this point, but we will keep working with the REACT committee to see when they'll be ready with those recommendations.
Okay, and is there any budget associated with this work that you have asked for in terms of moving forward a plan?
As far as the master planning, is that what you're referring to? Okay. The master planning, it would be the natural next step. That's why we're supporting the bill, because that's where you know basically how much it's going to cost you, what is the timeline, what's the phasing. It encompasses all the factors that you would look into a capital plan. So that is the next step that we would naturally be looking into.
So is it likely or unlikely that we would see recommendations by the end of this year? Unlikely. Okay. I imagine. Okay. Those are my questions. I'm glad you all are in support of the bill, and I look forward to having a conversation with you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Nurse, and thank you for your leadership on renewable Rikers, and to all the folks here who've been working on renewable Rikers. I'm really grateful for your diligent advocacy. I think I'll actually start my questions there and then go a little more macro. I'm just interested, maybe Sana, Stephen, for you both. If you had a magic wand, what do you think is the most beneficial use of Rikers for decarbonization purposes to helping achieve our carbon reduction goals? Do you have a wish list of what we are able to accomplish there? Specific projects that you think would be most beneficial? The report that Councilmember Nurse referenced, talked a lot about wastewater emissions being something that we can maximize on Rikers. I think wastewater emissions are, after our building's second largest source of emissions. Is that what we should be focusing on, or what do you think?
I'm trying to remember what's the recommendations in the feasibility study, but I believe there we talked about solar being one. I believe wind was one of the other options. We haven't really looked too far, knowing that we have that master plan coming, right? This is where we're going to explore all the different options. So it is a complicated question because, we could have a wish list, but it may not be feasible, and also the cost may be very prohibitive. So I don't know if, Steve, you have any other thoughts on it, but yeah, this is where we are with it.
Anything else? No?
No.
If I can add something,
Please,
Chair.
Commissioner, of course.
I think, wastewater treatment would be a generational game-changing thing, if that could be possible on Rikers Island. In addition to complementing that with solar, and I think hopefully significant advancement in battery storage, are the 3 things at the top of my mind, personally and professionally, that could replace what Rikers Island is today. And it could be a general change in just climate action for not only the city, but this country, if we were able to do that.
Great. Thank you for that. And just would like to understand a little bit better the status of the Renewable Rikers Advisory Committee. So it's chaired by DCAS. It's supposed to meet 4 times a year. Has it met in 2025?
Yeah, January 1, 2025 was the last meeting.
The last meeting. So we've had 1 meeting this year. Is there another meeting scheduled?
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
Because we don't really need a meeting since we are developing the recommendations. Until those recommendations are developed, we didn't feel like we needed one.
Okay. Commissioner, I can't imagine a person who is better positioned to respond to questions about the turnover of land on Rikers Island from DOC to DCAS than you, considering the hats that you've worn. my understanding is that DOC is supposed to turn over buildings and parcels of land that are not in active use every 6 months. There are 42 and a half acres and the JATC facility under DCAS control that were transferred in the de Blasio administration. Is that correct?
That is accurate.
And I understand that DOC still manages access to that land that was transferred over to DCAS. What role has DCAS taken in managing those sites?
Yeah, so DCAS does not have any real management authorization over the transferred properties. Those decisions are made by DOC
But if they were transferred, why wouldn't they be in your control?
because the island is under the control of the Department of Corrections. So when DCAS has jurisdiction over unused city-owned property, the agency does not assume day-to-day management of those responsibilities. Agencies do relinquish surplus properties to DCAS, which gives us jurisdiction until a new city use is identified.
So you have not considered interim uses, ways that we could start to activate these 42 and a half acres of land and a vacant facility? And frankly, there's other vacant land that could have been transferred to DCAS as well, significant amounts of vacant land. But you have not considered any interim uses for the property that's technically in DCAS's control.
Not at this time.
And do you think that DCAS should have more control over the land and property that's in your jurisdiction?
I mean, I think it makes it a little bit challenging when you're talking about Rikers Island because there's still active jail operations that are happening there, so that would make it challenging.
And then from a kind of decarbonization vantage point, do we think interim uses like solar or other short-term opportunities, composting, et cetera, could be opportunities to take advantage of this large vacant land?
It's possible. We'd have to give that more significant thought.
And why hasn't that been considered to date? I mean, I just mean these properties were transferred 4 years ago. This is not a new issue. I'm just, is there any insight that you can share? It's just, it's too complicated to deal.
I don't think it's, well, listen, I think a lot of Rikers Island is just a complex situation overall. I think we also wanted to empower our REACT members to be able to have a say in the future of that, even on an interim basis. So I await their recommendations to see what they might come up with. But I think the legislation before us and the master plan is going to create significant movement in that direction for us as a city to be fully committed to moving forward with what the future of Rikers Island will be.
Have you received any updates on potential new transfers of land? Or, I mean, if DCAS doesn't even really control the land that's in your jurisdiction, I don't know if it's germane. But have there been any conversations about transferring additional vacant land on Rikers to DCAS?
We have not. I would refer you to DOC because they make those decisions.
Yeah, I would just say, from my perspective, and the opportunities to activate this land on an interim basis, the opportunities for DCAS to take more control over more of the island, both advances our renewable Rikers goals and advances our commitment to the closure of Rikers. And so showing that tangible progress to New Yorkers, making this whole thing real, I think matters. And so I really would encourage you all in the waning days of this administration to think about, are there ways that we can demonstrate that forward momentum and progress and the commitment that you speak to in this testimony, which I appreciate, but to make it a little bit more tangible for New Yorkers to feel. Great. Thank you again to Councilmember Nurse for her leadership on this. We really appreciate it. I do want to take a little bit of a step back to just look at broader decarbonization efforts. So, DCAS has, I think rightly, been tasked as the lead agency on our city's carbon reduction goals and has oversight of the strategies that are pursued and the projects that are selected. The 2021 action plan at the tail end of the de Blasio administration at the height of COVID laid out a detailed set of steps to meet our decarbonization goals. The 2024 brief update that you all provided noted some of the challenges that DCAS has encountered. Is there a current plan for how we will reach our emission reduction targets? Is there a set list of projects that must be completed for us to achieve these goals? Is the budget and the staffing that we need to accomplish them in place? Where does that plan live? How can myself as a council member and the public at large do a better job of kind of grasping how we're making progress in achieving these critical objectives?
So, of course, we have a plan. And we have shared a list of our 10 largest projects with you, if you recall, after the meeting.
The budget hearing, yeah.
Yeah, and we are still on track with that list of projects. Of course, we have we implement over 1,000 projects a year, right? So we have a lot of projects in the pipeline that we're working on. If you'd like to see more projects, we can share them with you, but it's hard for me now to list all the projects here at the hearing. But we'll be more than happy to share the projects. And just to give you an idea, the way we've been looking at things, of course, follows the IEP that you mentioned, the action plan. So the categories that we look at, they're pretty much, they fall onto these categories that I'm going to mention. Lighting upgrades is a big one, right? That's easy to decarbonize. HVAC efficiency, that's another category that we focus our projects on. Renewable energy, obviously solar, and water infrastructure measures. Those 4 categories make up most of our portfolio, but of course we do also operational improvements, envelope upgrades, and electrification.
Okay. I'm going to just drill down on those questions that I was asking a moment ago. I think for context, city was supposed to reduce emissions by 30% by 2017, and the first term of de Blasio failed to hit that deadline. Supposed to reduce by 40% by 2025. This year, we failed to hit that deadline. As of March, DCAS said, at our budget hearing that we would meet the 40% reduction goal in FY27. Is that continue to be correct?
Correct.
And in FY25, DCAS, to your credit, to your great credit, did exceed its goal of over 50,000 metric tons reduced and hit 60,000. But unfortunately, for the preceding 4 years, DCAS was short on those targets. Could you lay out what are the remaining total reductions needed to hit that 40% threshold? Is Chippy basically the single thing that's going to hit us over that benchmark?
Good question. So our decarbonization projects alone, we will be able to achieve the 40% by 2027, even without Chippy. With Chippy, it's a guarantee, right? So Chippy is on time, by the way. It's going to be up and running in the spring of 2026, still on track. So that's going to help us to actually achieve more than what's in the IAP targets.
Okay.
But it's a combination of
yeah.
both, but we continue to do decarbonization, of course.
Why don't I do the largest projects, and then we'll dig in on Chippy a little bit. So we did really appreciate that list of the 10 largest kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction projects that you shared with us earlier this year. They represented a total of 70,000 metric tons reduced by 2032. Half of that reduction comes from the Wards Island wastewater facility. Most of these projects will reduce emissions by 2,000 to 3,000 metric tons. Is there a more comprehensive list than the top 10 of all projects that are underway so that we can do a better job of kind of understanding what progress we're making as a city?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, we do have more than the list that we provided.
Is there a public place where that exists?
We don't really publish that list because it is dynamic. Sometimes, projects don't happen. An agency could say, this year I cannot do this, and it gets delayed a little bit. So we try not to publish it, leave it internal, but we can provide you with more projects, like I said, that, we know for sure that are, they're solid, besides the list that we provided you before. So we could give you more if you like.
Oh, more is more.
Yeah.
In your testimony, the commissioner referenced 3 projects. I just wanted to confirm that they are all underway. The Brooklyn Museum Deep Energy Retrofit, the 57th Street Garage, the OCME Center for Forensic Sciences. Have those all begun? Yes?
Yes.
Great. That's good to hear. And can you just, I think it would be beneficial for me and for for everyone, DCAS serves as the clearinghouse that is helping to work, I presume, in partnership with the new task force at OMB, or relatively new task force at OMB, to decide which projects are getting funded. And could you walk me through what's the process for how agencies are bringing projects to you for review, and what the determination is for which projects are getting funded and which are not?
Yeah, so we always look at projects that have the most impact, right? most impact. Again, staffing. Could the agency, for example, is the agency able to provide resources to finish the project? Because there's nothing worse than starting a project and not being able to finish it on time, right? So we work with the agencies actually on a daily basis to figure out what project they like to be initiating. We look at the metrics associated with the project. We look for, like I said, the impact, staffing, resources. Is it in a DAC area? Is the benchmarking, low so that maybe we need to push that one up? So we do look at different factors as we develop the list of projects.
So, it's always resource dependent, right? That's the world we live in. The 2021 action plan laid out $3.68 billion in city investments that were needed from 2022 to 2030 to achieve our climate goals and to hit these benchmarks. Comprised, I believe, of $1.66 billion from 22 to 25 and $2.02 billion from 26 to 30. In the 24 update, DCAS noted that there were budgetary constraints that have led to delays in active and pipeline projects. Could you provide an update on how much was spent from 2022 to 2025 and what is the funding that has been allocated from 26 to 30, just relative to the 3.68 that was cited in this 21 report, 3.68 billion?
Do we have that breakdown now? Okay.
Thanks for that question. So the way the IEP created the budget was it included actually the large scale renewables. So that kind of mixes capital projects, the investment in transmission, as well as expense funded projects. But so I want to pivot from that to just tell you what we have spent. And I think we want to get you the exact numbers, but it's approximately around $1.5 billion has been spent since 2021. We have, as we mentioned in the testimony, $3.4 billion 10-year capital plan. 77% of that is front-loaded in the first 5 years. So your answer is it's about $2.5 billion over the next 5 years. And we have our total operating budget is about $110 million, and about 80% of that goes towards direct decarbonization efforts.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Those are positive figures. EO 89, which I think was a de Blasio era executive order, directed OMB to establish a capital plan carbon budget to report the emissions impacts of capital projects valued over $1 million to DCAS. Is that occurring? And is that something DCAS would be able to report on publicly? Compliance with EO 89 and the carbon benefits from large capital projects, carbon reduction benefits?
So we do publish EO 89, right? It's coming up actually in November. You'll see our fiscal year 24. The last one was fiscal year 23. And from that, you would see that actually we're on the right track. We're still, you would see more reductions than what you spoke about today. So we're definitely.
That is helpful. I have some more questions, but I will pause and invite former chair of this committee, my colleague, Councilmember Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. My question has to do with, I don't know what exactly Intro 1378 is asking, but when I go down Broadway, I see vacant buildings that are owned by the city. I know where some of them, both sides of Broadway in this area. I see, I don't know what you call them, newsstands that are owned by the city all over the place, et cetera. Then I called IBO, because a while ago I was like, I want the list. Everything could be as beautiful as City Store, everything. And congratulations on that. That's my favorite store in New York. But where is there such a list? Have you been to the City Store?
It's closed right now. When is it reopened?
Where the hell have you been? It's friggin' open. We cut the ribbon.
When was the ribbon cutting? I missed. Nobody invited me last week.
Because you didn't have anything to do with the scarves.
I chaired this committee. I thought I might have gotten an invite on that one. I love the City Store. I didn't know it reopened. Look at me. I knew it was closed.
It's wide open.
All right,
brand new, fabulous.
We gotta have you do a video for us, Chair.
He didn't forget it. Don't worry about it.
It is the #1 place I go to buy gifts for people who I work with for many, many years.
He obviously hasn't been there in a while. Last week. Because you don't pay attention. they bought scarves that are long and not square. I'm so excited. So my question is, though, around the city you have a lot of vacant property. Is there such a list? It says it's on open data, which is my open data bill, but I don't see it there. So I want to know, is there a list of the properties that you manage and that are, some are DOT, some are other agencies, but when I see vacant stores and it says vacant, I get, why are these not rented? So that's my question. Is there a list of DCAS stores, particularly storefronts, that are vacant and not rented, et cetera? And when are we doing about it?
Thank you for your question, Council Member. So DCAS does publish data on the Open Data website in the form of the CULP data set right now. That's the city-owned and leased property data set. And that's data that we collect from other agencies with regard to the use of the property. So there is data out there on how agencies are using the property. But with the intentions of this bill, we look forward to working with council staff in order to craft it in the right way to get the data out there for public consumption.
Because what I'm looking for is the vacant data. That's not on open data. So that's what you would help us work on, the vacancies?
Well, there are agencies that report vacant use of properties, but specific within spaces and buildings is something that we would look forward to working on.
Are you going to be doing something about 280 Broadway and all the ones that we can pass every single day along Broadway? Somebody renting those stores at some point?
The 280 Broadway retail spaces are actually under long-term lease, so they are leased out actively to a private tenant.
But how come there's nobody there?
That is something that we would have to discuss with our tenant.
Okay. And then the second question is, I know your fleet manager is fabulous, and I know he's trying to make them all electric. Do you have enough charging stations for all those fleets?
Yes, so we actually have the largest EV charging network in the East Coast. I believe that number is over 2,100 easily. We have others installation projects underway. We've added over 400 fast chargers to our electric charging station network and have approximately about 161 that are solar. So we're always looking to expand on city assets, and that has been moving briskly. And we've actually, I think not long ago, about January 2023, we were only at about 1,300 EV chargers, and now we're well over 2,100.
All right, and those are just for city, because I do get complaints from individual residents because there are so few charging stations. But yours are only for city vehicles,
The
is that correct?
significant majority are for city. We do have one that's for public and city use. And we're also thinking about how can we create possibly more public use, city use charging networks.
Okay, I would love to see more in Manhattan because people are complaining all the time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be glad to give you a tour of the city store.
I don't
whenever
need a
you'd
tour
like.
of the city store. I know the city store well, but I appreciate it. And if you want to hang out at the city store, I'll be there. I just want to go back for one moment. I appreciate you all confirming that we're on pace for our FY27 target of hitting the 40% reduction. Can you clarify just how many additional metric tons do we have to reduce by to hit that FY27 goal, and how many additional tons do we have to reduce by to hit the 50% goal by 2030? And just to kind of drill down, of the 10 largest projects that you shared with us earlier of this year, 6 are scheduled to be completed by FY27, totaling about 17,000 tons. All 10 of those projects, I think, are on pace for FY 2032 to be completed. We're about 77,000 tons, mostly the Wards Island wastewater facility. But just trying to understand, if we get those 6 projects done by FY 27 at 17,000 tons, is that what that's not going to be enough for us to hit no? So could you just lay out what's the gap?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
If you want to do broad strokes.
Yeah, it's approximately 600,000 metric tons are needed to hit the 40% goal, and another 400,000 to reach the 50% goal. And that would be, we would reach that through a combination of our project queue, completed projects, as well as through Chippy, the cleanup.
But I thought what I heard, Sana, and I don't remember your title, I apologize, the Deputy Commissioner for Energy Management, testify to was that without Chippy, we would hit our 40% goal by FY27 just based on projects that were in the pipeline. Is that do I have that right?
That's what we're projecting. We have a model, and that's what we're projecting, that we can reach that by 2027.
Okay.
So really, Chippy is getting us. Chippy was our strategy to help get to the 50% reduction goal by 2030.
And just for the record, assuming Chippy comes online in May of 26 or whatever the date is, what numerical impact will that have? Or is that projected to have?
I think we want to get back to you. That would fully decarbonize our electricity emissions. And I don't want to misstate what that portion is.
I don't know if you guys saw the advertisements over the weekend of Ronald Reagan and tariffs. No? This was Doug Ford, the premier from Ontario, put up some advertisements. The president wasn't very happy about them. Things, as we all know, are challenging between the United States and Canada right now. Are you concerned about Canada's threat to cut off energy to New York? Do we have confidence that Chippy is going to be in place, a year and a half from now? Or less, 6 months from now, excuse me.
Yeah, 6 months from now,
6
spring
months.
of 2026 is coming. Yeah, we are confident the project is not going to be affected by tariffs or anything like that, because also all the equipment have been purchased, right? All of that. So we're almost there. It's almost 6 months away. So there is no threat to this the Shippy line.
And is there any alternatives that we've had to consider as a result of the Clean Path New York project being canceled?
Shippy alone is going to cover our operations fully. So again,
Right.
no threat there.
Thank you. Buildings, the largest source of emissions, the public sector and the private sector and the city as a whole. Planned interventions were expected to deliver a reduction of 184,000 metric tons of CO2 by 2025. Are you able to share if we reached that emission reduction target for buildings? And if so, or if not, how many metric tons of carbon did we reduce by?
Yeah, we can share that. And that information is published in the city's greenhouse gas inventory, sector by sector. So we can see in that inventory how much building sector has been reduced.
Do you recall if we hit the goal?
I don't want to misspeak, so yeah.
Okay. Planned energy efficiency projects were expected to reduce total building emissions by 45%, 128,000 tons. How many of the planned energy, if you're able to share or follow up with, how many of the planned energy efficiency projects noted in the 2021 action plan have been implemented, delayed? Are we able to get a status? Is that the right thing for us to be looking at, that 2021 action report of kind of the slate of projects and what their status is? Is that a helpful way for us to understand the progress that we're making?
It's not unhelpful. I mean, that at the time we looked at our total project pipeline and looked at the likely emission reduction impact of that. The majority of those projects are likely completed by now. They were mostly near-term projects. Since then, we've focused increasingly on electrification projects, which tend to take, and more comprehensive HVAC projects. So those are the bigger projects that were identified in the plan as needing to happen.
And Stephen, where should we be tracking our progress on those projects? Like we as the council and the public? Is there a way for us to do that?
Well, I believe that, as you mentioned before, the city's carbon capital budget would have progress on that. I believe that's public.
Okay. I mean, and forgive me if this is a ill-informed question, but if we had completed all of the projects that were in the 21 plan, then we would have achieved our goal by 25, right?
So the big challenge that we faced relative to the assumptions of the plan are twofold. One, we assumed that the grid was going to get cleaner because the assumption was that the state's large-scale clean energy projects were going to be happening. So we assumed a cleaner grid. We also didn't fully account for how negative an impact we would have from the closure of Indian Point. So our grid has gotten 25% dirtier. If you actually look at our FY23 emissions, what they would have been if Indian Point were still online, it's about a 33% reduction. So we really took a big step back when the grid got dirtier.
It's fascinating. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you for explaining. One of the largest investments the city has made to reduce building emissions was the heat electrification initiative, planned to account for 57% of the budgeted buildings' emission reductions by replacing existing boiler systems with electrification. The city planned to ramp up heat electrification projects at a pace of, I believe, 2% of city building square footage per year by 2030. How many square feet were electrified over the past 4 years? Or can you break down, if there's a better or different way to break that down, I welcome it, but that was just what we figured.
We're at less than 1% of
Okay.
the
Total.
total building square footage.
Total.
For electrification, yeah. However, we are working with NREL, I'm trying to remember the National Renewable Energy Lab. We are developing together an electrification study that will help us assess pathways to 2050 net zero and also focus on electrification.
And how many projects have been completed so far? If we're at less than 1%, are you able to quantify what we have been able to accomplish?
So a couple of things here. Under leading the charge, we already have 33 schools in design and construction that are being electrified. We also have more than 100 buildings operated by more than a dozen agencies that have incorporated electrified HVAC and hot water systems. And we continue to scale up.
Okay. There was planned to be about $600 million for heat electrification initiatives. Do you know how much we've actually spent?
Do you have that number?
So DCAS itself put forward $1 billion in its capital plan. About $300 million of that has been capitally committed and is underway. The School Construction Authority put up another $1.8 billion, and I'd have to get back. It's in their capital plan. I'd have to get back to you on the level of commitment, but I'm sure it exceeds what we've committed to date.
That's helpful. Thank you. Is the city continuing to install new gas boilers and projects?
There may be some legacy projects still happening, but we've, starting about 3 years ago, we stopped funding those projects. And we've told agencies have come to us and said, for example, NYPD came to us and said, we have 20 boilers we want to reinstall. And we said, no, go back to the drawing board and let's electrify. And we have more than a dozen NYPD electrification projects now.
So did the Brooklyn Municipal Building just predate that policy?
Yeah, so there were definitely some projects that predated that policy, particularly a few larger projects that took 3 to 5 years to plan. But when agencies have come to us,
The Brooklyn Municipal Building is taking longer than that?
we no longer fund those projects.
Okay. My constituents on Droleman Street will be very happy when that project is completed. But neither here nor there. Okay, that's helpful to hear. I wish we had gotten there for the Brooklyn Municipal Building because that's a very large city facility. Shifting to building fuel, from 2006 to 2019, the city reduced fuel consumption by about 43%. Do you have an update on where we are today? And then specifically, I'm really interested in drilling down on Councilmember Gennaro's legislation phasing out heating oil number 4. It's supposed to no longer be in use in public school buildings as of July 1st of this year. Are we in compliance there? So just again, 2 questions. How much progress have we made on our fuel consumption reduction goals, however you want to lay that out for us to best understand it? And secondly, what's the status on use of heating oil number 4?
So fuel oil number 4 has been phased out completely. We met that requirement in 2025. Yeah.
Did you guys celebrate it? Did I miss it? No.
I
You
don't
should
know
celebrate
why
it.
we didn't announce it, but
You should
we
celebrate
have.
it.
We
Good
should
things deserve celebration.
have. I know.
Even if I'll say nice things. Like the opening of the city store, which I want you to all know on the record that my chief of staff knew about this. She was eager to return to the city store. I'm the only one who wasn't paying attention. I apologize.
You should visit. It's really
I'm
nice.
coming. I'll come. I promise.
As far as you're talking about oil or energy consumption, because I was going to say that energy consumption, we're proud to say that we're at 14% energy reduction. So that I have. In terms of oil, I'm not sure if you have that number handy right now.
I can tell you today. I can tell you qualitatively. We can follow up with the numbers. We had the city's heating oil phase out program, which I worked on in a previous job, really was first premised on, and at the time, a switch to natural gas. So a lot of our reductions in fuel oil were as a result of conversions to natural gas. Currently, as I said, we're not funding those projects anymore, really focused more on electrification. We have the Leading the Charge initiative, which intends to fully electrify schools, but we're also looking to partially electrify schools through, partial upgrades to HVAC systems, as well as removing domestic hot water from the boilers and just electrifying those pieces. So our strategy going forward for reducing fuel oil is going to be electrification.
Helpful. Shifting to Leading the Charge, my understanding was that you were focused on electrifying 100 schools. I believe 69, that the funding you reference in the SEA budget is for 69 schools. Do you know if the additional 30 schools have been selected, or if that's in motion, or is that an SEA question?
They haven't yet been selected.
Okay. When were they supposed to have been selected by, or we're supposed to do 100 schools by 2030. So if we haven't selected those 30 schools yet, we're not going to hit that goal, right?
The policy was to complete or initiate. So by initiate, it meant to begin funding and design. Currently, as was made clear in that SCA budget, there is a funding gap. And we made a significant down payment of about $2.8 billion to date to fund
And
those
$4 billion is the
projects.
total amount needed?
We have learned that those projects are more expensive, so there's likely a larger gap than we had originally projected.
Okay. I mean, I hear from parents in my schools about how excited they are to try to who really want to participate in this, and it's been, it's working with SCA is like banging my head against the wall. So,
yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, there's been no process for like how do we suggest schools or identify schools that are really eager to make this happen and deal with the challenges that can come with the work and who will be supportive and helpful. So we have a significant funding gap, but the goal of the announcement in the plan was to only announce and initiate the 100 schools. It wasn't to complete them by 2030.
Well, we're looking to complete the majority of them, but again, there's a funding gap, and that needs to be addressed in future capital plans. One thing that can't speak to the process for selecting the sites. That's driven by SCA, but what we have learned is these projects are much more complex than we thought they were going to be. They involve often not only decommissioning the boiler room, addressing fire and life safety issues, which needed to be addressed anyways, locating a lot of equipment on the roofs, which sometimes triggers structural issues. So these end up being pretty comprehensive renovation projects, and much more so than we initially understood.
Specifically around electrification, those projects I presume all include heat pumps, and I've been really impressed by the NYCHA team and the Woodside Houses pilot. Have you all been talking to them? Is there coordination happening? Are we learning things from their pilots that we think are going to be beneficial for application across the city?
There's definitely some, if you're referring to the window.
The window-based heat pumps that
there's definitely some application in our portfolio, particularly for smaller buildings. We're very eager to see what the next steps with NYCHA's program is. I think they've installed a few thousand of them, but it's still in a phase of testing and piloting, both with their residents and also the technology companies. So we're very actively watching that program, and if it works, there's definitely application within the city government portfolio.
And are you seeing any shifts in the marketplace around heat pumps becoming more widespread in the Northeast that could be beneficial for kind of broader adoption in the city?
Definitely, and part of what you're seeing with just increasing demand in the city, and thanks to the state's leadership and incentivizing this, you're definitely seeing increasing demand for electricity due to heat pumps, diffusion, or we've also seen new products come to market. I think the gap is for our largest buildings, there's still not a great kit of parts for electrifying those buildings because the capacity of those systems doesn't really exist. So
What scale of buildings are you concerned about?
our large office buildings and some of our process-oriented warehouses. And
Are you able to give me a square footage, just to ballpark?
why don't we follow up with you? We can give you some more information.
Solar. So Commissioner, and Councilmember Hanif is on Zoom. It's always a pleasure to have Councilmember Hanif with us. And let us know, Shahana, if you have any questions. Solar. The city's original goal, as the commissioner noted in his testimony, well, let me restate. The commissioner noted in his testimony, I think you said 32 or 33 megawatts. So we're up slightly from the 31.3 that was reported in the MMR. So that's progress, little bit by little bit. I believe that there's an additional 50 megawatts under development. The city's original goal was to add 100 megawatts total. So that gets us to about 82 or 83 of solar on city assets. Could you lay out for me what's the plan to get to the 100 megawatts and the steps to get there? And correct me if I had anything wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say, so 32 megawatts are completed. In the pipeline, we have 41 megawatts. So it's
41.
not 42.
Okay.
Yeah, 41.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep, across 137 projects. So we have not fully identified, that, as we mentioned before, right, there are, it's challenging, right, to find ready to go sites. So we're in the process of developing the full list. We're not there yet.
What are the obstacles? What are the biggest obstacles? What's been hard?
Roof repairs is going to be a big one, and that costs a lot of money as well.
You've been prioritizing buildings that are more recently constructed or have recently had roof renovation projects so as to not have a likely conflict with upcoming capital projects?
Yeah, of course we're looking at that, but it's not enough.
Right.
The other challenge is, we cannot just look at roofs, obviously, like you said. We have to look at, for example,
Rikers Island.
parking lot.
Just kidding. I'm not kidding, but
Yeah.
keep going.
Carports is going to be another one we're looking into. It's not easy to find sites in the city that we can install solar on. But we're optimistic that we're going to get there. And OMB already added some funding for solar, $295 million.
Has there been any directive from City Hall to conduct, for agencies to review their portfolios and evaluate? I mean, I know that Matt and his team have a sophisticated understanding of the city portfolio, but have we been pushing agencies to do more and to really look at what the opportunities are for solar within their footprints?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. But we're still not finding the sites.
We're gonna have to find sites
Yeah.
eventually. That's
We're
why
not going to
in
hit
the
this goal of 100 megawatts by 2030, right? If we've only identified 70, if we only have completed or identified 3/4 of what's needed, we're not, right? So what should we be doing that would bring agencies to the table more and help us identify more viable locations?
Yeah. So just to be clear, right? The 41 megawatt, when we say it's in the pipeline, meaning it's been identified and we can go with.
No. I give you credit for that.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that there are no other sites that can be ready for solar. It's just that, again, they have to be, the roof repairs have to be done. That's what I mean by not, we're talking only on what's in the pipeline. It doesn't mean we have
You don't have other
sites
ideas.
that we
Right.
can get to
Sure.
100. Yeah.
And how about FDNY? Have they been too stringent? Have they been cooperative? Have they been a significant obstacle?
Not to my knowledge.
You sure?
I mean, we work very closely with FDNY to ensure that our systems meet all the safety requirements that are necessary in the city, and we have a strong partnership with them.
That was a very diplomatic answer, but we do have legislation that we've been advocating for without success to make it easier to get more solar on rooftops, and we're going to continue to push for that in the new administration. Schools, solar on schools. So DCAS has shared I believe that 90 schools have had solar installations to date, representing 19.7 megawatts, and approximately 110 more schools are in the pipeline. Chalkbeat, though, reported a few weeks ago that we're currently at 126 schools, which I think means that 35 of your 110 schools that are in the pipeline have been completed. Please tell me if we have those numbers right, just for our own internal tracking. Unfortunately, as a part of that big, beautiful bill, Donald Trump cut federal tax credits for school solar incentives. Is that going to have a meaningful impact on the city's solar plans on schools moving forward? And can you quantify that for our benefit?
So just to clarify, it's 33 schools, not
33 schools
33 schools are currently in progress.
in progress. Okay. How many have you completed? Is the Chalkbeat article of 126? Has completed. They got that right?
The prior number you cited was just for the portfolio that we completed in December, but it was a subset of the total number of schools. So
Got it.
It's 126 today.
126 to date, and then the 33 number is additional schools in the pipeline. Is that what that references? Would you mind just speaking into the mic, Stephen?
I'm sorry. Let us follow up with you for the total pipeline, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, that would be great. And the impact of Trump's cut to the federal tax credits for school solar incentives? Can you quantify what that's going to do to impact our planning and the work we're planning for schools?
So, the BBB Act does affect it in a sense that,
Thank you.
the discount, right, that we would be getting from developers, when we do the PPA agreement on solar, from discussions with contractors and developers, is that cost going to come up. So that discount that we used to get to implement the solar is going to be now less.
Okay. Can you
So
quantify
cost,
this?
mostly cost.
I understand there's a cost impact. We lose a tax incentive. Are you able to quantify this or to just help us understand the impact?
We've heard 20%
Wow.
increase in cost, 20 to 30%.
Wow. Okay.
But we haven't seen yet the real numbers.
I'd like to drill down a little bit on staffing. This 2021 action plan that I've referenced ad nauseum in this hearing forecasted that 280 positions were needed. I believe those were both DCAS roles and agency roles, although please correct me. At FY26 adoption, there were 135 positions in the DCAS Energy Management Unit of Appropriation. So half, approximately, of that 280 figure. So are all of those 135 positions filled? I presume those are all positions that report up to the Deputy Commissioner. What about the other 145 positions that were forecasted in 2021 as needed? Were those intended to be DCAS roles? Do we need those roles at DCAS to achieve our climate goals? Are those positions that have been funded at other agencies? Could you just help us understand it? And are you exempted from the 2-to-1 hiring freeze in your portfolio, Sana, or Deputy Commissioner? So it's a lot, but I can.
We are not exempt. I think certain titles are exempt, I want to say.
Okay.
I believe some engineering degree, with a PE, for example, would be exempt. But for the most part, we're not exempt. So we don't have the total headcounts. 125 was the number that was in the IAP for DEM, and we're at 33% vacancy.
33% vacancy of those 135 positions?
Correct. So we
you've
have
got 80-something, 90 people?
84,
Okay.
yep.
And the forecasted figure of 280, was that intended to be fully DCAS headcount?
No, that includes, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead,
please.
finish. Okay. That included the agency energy personnel, the personnel that we would help place at the
And
agencies.
are you tracking how many of those positions have been filled?
Yes.
Could you share that with us?
Yes, they had, I believe the vacancies there is 47%.
47% have vacancy.
Yes, for
So
the
of
agency.
the 145 positions, 70 of them are filled or something to that effect?
I believe it was 106 positions allocated for AEPs, is
Okay.
agency energy personnel, and we are at 47% vacancy there.
Okay, so 50-something positions filled and 80-something positions filled for you, so 130 out of, so we filled half of the 280 right now, currently, today. About half of the positions that were anticipated that would be necessary for us to achieve our climate goals are currently filled in city government. Okay, that is, I appreciate the direct answers. It is not something we always get at hearings, and I am grateful for them. Thank you. I guess I'll just ask, you can dance however you'd like, but do we need more project managers and planning staff at DCAS and at city agencies to move more of these projects forward on the timelines that we all want to see realized?
We always need more project managers, so I'm not going to dance around that.
Fair. I'd like to ask about the chief decarbonization officers the commissioner mentioned in his remarks. I think that you said in your testimony 8 of the positions have been filled. Is that right? Correct. So the EO, again, EO 89 of 2021 required 11 city agencies to appoint a chief decarbonization officer. I think as of 23, we were only at 2. So now that we're at 8, that's progress. What are the 3 agencies that have failed to appoint a chief decarbonization officer?
DCLA, Parks, and DOC.
Parks and DOC.
To be fair to DOC, they did have one appointed, and that person left.
That was during your tenure, though.
I don't know if they left during my tenure or after.
I just meant you appointed them.
Yeah.
I was giving you the credit.
Okay.
They,
Thank you.
on the record, I just want to be clear. Parks really should get on it, and DCLA as well. That is really unfortunate. We will reach out to the commissioners at both agencies or all agencies. That is helpful.
We are working with them to try to identify candidates.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 4 years. Yeah. I mean, if they put up postings, I mean, if they made any effort at all, I mean, Parks especially, it is so central to their mission, it's offensive that they haven't done it, but we're here. I think that I asked my chippy questions. I do have some questions about missing reports, but I think it's better for me to just send those over electronically. So we'll follow up an email after the hearing on that. And I'd like to check in on battery storage. Well, I've got, 4 or 5 more topics I'd like to run through. Hopefully I'll be able to go fast. Although I have to say, I'm sad that Keith isn't here to take credit for all of the great work of the city fleet. But you all can hear that Councilmember Brewer and I had nice things to say about him.
Keith and his team has done amazing work. He's at a press conference right now with DOT, so that's why he's not here.
Good for him. He really has. He's one of the wizards of city government. We're fortunate to have him serving. Battery storage. So in the 2024 update that DCAS shared, the city had installed approximately 0.28 megawatts of battery storage on city properties. Is there an updated figure you can share with us today? And what are the city's goals on battery storage installations? Are there currently sites under evaluation, or kind of where are we at?
I don't have that number. I don't know if that number has increased since, but because usually we report only when projects are completed, so I have to get back to you on that one. In terms of storage, we continue to look at storage as part of our portfolio. We have now ongoing at Wards Island. We are installing 10 megawatt of storage there, so that's a big one. Also at Spring Creek as well, though I don't recall the megawatt there. But we continue to look at placing storage as part of our
Is there a
project.
North Star goal? Do we have a objective that we're trying to accomplish of X number of megawatts of battery storage by Y date that's kind of informing our efforts, or is it catch as catch can at this point?
We don't have a goal right now
Okay.
for storage. We're focusing on solar, mainly solar right now, yeah.
That would be a good bill. Somebody should introduce it. So I think we have a battery master storage plan. Don't we have a? Yeah, we do. We do have a battery master storage plan. We have that bill. Wastewater. So after buildings, second largest source of emissions, I understand, are our wastewater facilities, our wastewater treatment facilities. The largest project currently underway is the reconstruction of the Wards Island Wastewater Resource Recovery Facility. digester tanks, that is a mouthful, which will reduce carbon emissions by approximately 40,000 metric tons. Is this project still on track to be completed by January 1st, 2029?
Yes, yes.
Great answer. DEP operates 14 wastewater resource recovery facilities. Are there other projects planned for DEP facilities that are significant opportunities for us to be looking at right now?
Yes, we have the North River cogeneration and electrification project. Oh, no, that's the one that actually we finished in the MMR, right? Yeah, that's completed. Sorry, I apologize. Are we looking at more? There is the electric plant that's in your list too, Cannonsville. That one is on track as well. That has 11,000, almost 12,000 metric tons reduction. So we do work with DEP on their facilities to see what can be done in their facilities. It's not always easy because that has to be like 24 hours continuous operation. Sometimes it gets complicated there, but we do work with DEP on what next sites can be used for solar.
Parochially, as the council member for the 33rd district, upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility at Newtown Creek, which I believe are responsible for something like for treating 16 or 17, 18% of the poop in New York City, was supposed to reduce annual emissions by about 90,000 metric tons. Do you know if we did the project, that was the projection, do you know if the actual project achieved those goals? Are we able to kind of quantify the progress that we made through that project?
I'm not 100% sure.
Referring to the sludge thickening project, it's still underway.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
one other thing, if I could just mention,
Please.
with regard to DEP, we do big projects like sludge thickening, like the membrane at Wards Island. We're also looking more granularly at all of their water resource recovery facilities for methane leaks. So we've got I think 13 sites. We've just funded a capital project to look to. We first funded a study, and now we're funding a capital project to go after leaks in the system. And those leaks. The reason those numbers are big is methane has a significant global warming potential. So when we find leaks and we fix them, it really makes a big difference. And we're working across DEP's entire portfolio to do that.
That's great. And I'm sure Commissioner Agarwal is a great partner in that effort. I think I will take a moment just to say, I think this conversation underscores the importance of Councilmember Nurse's legislation and the master plan, which again, I appreciate your support for, but it requires so many years of planning and preparation for us. And if we're going to relocate 2 or 3 or 4 wastewater treatment facilities potentially to Rikers Island, then it informs what capital work we're doing today and whether we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade West Harlem or wherever else or not. And what's a sensible long-term investment for the city to be making, and how do we maximally achieve our climate goals in as realistic a time frame as possible. And so I really hope that we can collectively work together to start to hash out what that plan looks like and work toward it, so that we're making the smart investments today and preparing for the best investments tomorrow. I wanted to ask about geothermal. In response to questions we raised earlier this year at the preliminary budget hearing in March, DCAS shared that you've been studying geothermal at the Cloisters as well as at Jacoby. Could you confirm if either of those sites have been deemed viable for geothermal?
Yeah, Jacoby, the result of that study was that given the hospital's critical care functionality, that a partial geothermal system was feasible. We don't have a plan for a project there yet. Would be a pretty big undertaking. The Cloisters project has not yet moved forward. It sort of had a mixed feasibility and was very expensive. We're also this year doing a study with the New York Botanical Garden.
Oh, okay, in the Bronx.
Yeah, and these projects tend to work best where there's open space, and which is why, we haven't done a lot of them, because finding that space is pretty challenging in the city.
Right. I mean, parochially, we have an 830 unit geothermal project going up that I think they've already started leasing in Greenpoint, 1 Java Street on the waterfront. And, if they're able to make geothermal work there, it's confusing to me why we're not able to make geothermal work in our large public campuses, whether those be some of the community college sites that I know you all have looked at in Queens and the Bronx, large parks facilities where we can, temporarily bring space offline, take advantage of the geothermal capacity, and then, restore or repair things to, even better than they were. It doesn't feel like we have a lot moving forward except potentially 1 or 2 sites.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, geothermal is more viable in a new building situation, like you mentioned. They're very expensive projects, and they're not, in terms of decarbonization metrics, they're not the projects that you look to first. You tackle the more cost-effective projects. So which is why it hasn't been a big focus for us, but we're starting to work more and more with some of the agencies that have open space, that have an interest, that see geothermal as the next phase of their decarbonization effort.
Great. I do have some fleet questions. I guess, Commissioner, I get to pepper you with those fleet questions. The city fleet has been one of the highlights, I think, of DCAS and the City of New York's efforts to reduce emissions overall. With nearly 29,000 vehicles, reducing emissions from city vehicles has had a critical impact on our air quality. And DCAS was successful in reducing fleet fossil fuel consumption by 50% by 2025. Our next target is to reach 80% by 2035. Are we on track to reach that goal?
Well, there's a couple of ways we're going to reach it. One is to really look forward to trying to get the technology where we can actually electrify much more larger vehicles that are putting emissions. I mean, that's why we took an interim step to move to renewable diesel with our heavy-duty fleet, in which we implemented it in 12,500 vehicles, in addition to making sure that we're buying vehicles in a schedule that allows for electrification and moving away from our fossil fuel vehicles.
Great. So I'm a bit concerned about the trajectories on EV purchasing. The MMR reported that there are 5,569 electric vehicles in our current fleet. 371 additional EVs were purchased last year. That's a decrease from 552 that were purchased in FY24 and nearly 1,200 that were added in FY23. At the time of our preliminary budget hearing in March, DCAS anticipated hitting 6,000 EVs by the end of the year. Are we on track to hit that goal?
We should hit the 6,000 number by the end of the year, and we're continuing to seek the restitution of these funds, including both expense and capital components, because EVs, as you know, dramatically save on not only fuel costs, but also maintenance costs as well.
So to hit our fully electric fleet by 2038 goal, and 2035 for light and medium-sized vehicles, 2038 for heavy and specialized, we would have to add, I think, something like 1,500 electric vehicles per year, so significantly more than what we're doing today. My understanding, and we've been pretty loud and vocal about this, especially when your predecessor was in place, Commissioner, about the impacts of Mayor Adams' PEGs on electric vehicles. Have there been ongoing discussions with ONB on the budget needed to get back on track to be able to hit these goals?
Yeah, we're constantly having communications with ONB to get back on track in order to increase our ability to purchase electric vehicles, in addition to really thinking how we can possibly use capital funding in order to do that, especially for light and medium vehicles.
Was or is DCAS relying on federal tax benefits for these purchases? Does the president's decision to end tax credits for EV purchases impact the city's plans or our projections on future purchasing? Have you noticed changes in the market?
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that, just to analyze how that could have impacted our fleet. But I think the grants that we did receive for fleet purchases went through.
Okay. Local Law 140 does require that the city only purchase zero-emission light-duty and medium-duty vehicles as of July 1st of this year. Do you know if we're in compliance? Have we purchased any vehicles since July 1st? Are they all zero-emission vehicles?
There are exceptions to that, which we would have to report out on.
Okay.
And we would obviously report out on those when we have to, mostly in the to do with the NYPD and the law enforcement specific specialty vehicles.
Okay, that's helpful. Charging ports. You know what? Actually, let me just pause. I'm always fixated on capital eligibility and have had a lot of good conversations with Keith about this, with the controller's office about this, less good conversations with OMB. Have you been able to make any progress? It's hard for me to understand. We've got an NYPD patrol car that costs over $50,000. It should be capitally eligible. It would make it so much easier for the NYPD to purchase these vehicles at scale if they didn't have to use expense money. We'd be able to achieve our goals, I think, much more confidently. Any traction that you've been making on this or suggestions for how we can work together to try and achieve capital eligibility on these purchases?
Yeah, we're in agreement. I mean, we've met with OMB, the NYPD, the Law Department, City and State Comptroller's Office to pursue this concept, especially in support of NYPD and other VTL law enforcement vehicles. So Law and OMB have collectively told us they're going to be pursuing this for state legislation. So we
Do you
would
know
move that
why state
forward.
legislation is needed?
Well, it's an ongoing debate. I mean, the Law Department and OMB feels that we need it. We have a different position than that, and we think that they should be capital eligible, especially since the amortization rate of these vehicles has been over 5 years.
Right. Well, I agree with you, and I talked to Councilmember Ariola about it. We wanted to work on this together. So this is not a partisan issue. I think there's broad consensus, except for the lawyers at OMB. So hopefully we can bring them along. Getting the General Counsel's Office at OMB to be cooperative is not an easy thing, as I think everyone who's worked in city government knows. But I really hope that we can continue to push on this together. I don't understand why state legislation would be necessary, and I do think it's a really important policy shift that we have to come to as a city. Charging ports, and then we'll try to wrap up. DCAS fell a bit short on its goals to install EV charging ports in 25. I think installing 221 in 25, down from 346 in the previous year. We're about 30 short of the goal of 2,100. The MMR noted in explaining why we were just a little short, not significantly, but very modestly short, that staffing limitations were partially responsible. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on those staffing challenges and what positions are needed for us to increase the pace of installations.
Yeah, so there are just a handful of vacancies within Fleet, which we're aggressively trying to fill. We've been working with OMB to sort of fill those when we do identify a candidate, as well as retention. We want to make sure we actually invest a lot in the Fleet team at DCAS, and we want to make sure we're able to retain those individuals. But that hasn't stopped us from having one of the largest network charging systems in the East Coast, and we've grown 63% since January of 2023. So we have made significant impact.
And just so I understand, are these charging ports exclusively for the city fleet? And we've had a lot less success. I mean, I think DCAS has done a good job. I think DOT has not. And in terms of EV port installations for the public at large, are there any lessons that you all have learned that you think we should be adopting for the public at large, on what's been working well or how we should be approaching this?
So specifically the DOT, we've just finished installing, it's not active yet, but fast chargers at 55 Water Street, which is the first time we've installed city charging port systems on private property. But given we have a significant lease at 54 Water Street, it allowed us the ability to do that.
Just to be clear, I'm less concerned about DOT headquarters than I am DOT's responsibility as the kind of agency in charge of getting more ports installed around the city. But sorry, I digress. It's good to see that there's an example to cite.
Yeah, we do offer, like as I stated earlier, the chargers are significantly for the use of the city's fleet. But DCAS just offered 22 chargers to the general public. These chargers have now been used over 140,000 times since 2021. So certainly the need is there. Internally, DCAS is working on additional public sites, including EDC Brooklyn Marine Terminal, Pier 4, Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, Upper Highland Park in Brooklyn, and Forest Park in Queens.
Okay, that's helpful. And last thing I wanted to ask about are just two District 33 construction questions. 120 Skirmerhorn. This is the Kings County Criminal Courthouse where we do arraignment. There are supposed to be ADA upgrades to ensure that detainees can be transferred safely and smoothly between the new jail and the courthouse. The last update we received from City Hall was that a new need would be submitted in September, in the September plan for construction. Do you know if that's occurred? I don't know if there's anyone on this.
Let me get back to you on that.
Okay, that would be great. It's a really important project for how detainees will be transferred in the community and the success of the jail. And we've gotten a commitment that it's all going to move forward and should be coterminous with the jail construction timeline, but we just want to make sure that that doesn't slip. And secondly is 360 Adams, which is one of my pet peeve priority projects. There is scaffolding outside of that's the courthouse there, kind of on Columbus Park, Adams and Columbus Park, between Drollman and Johnson. Scaffolding's been up there for 18 years, so there are kids graduating from high school that are younger, I should say, than this scaffolding. Construction was estimated to begin in May. It's now slipped to November. Do we know if that is going to actually start in November and if the completion date is still set for May of 28? But I don't think you.
Let me follow up with you on that as well.
Fair. Councilmember Brewer would like to ask another question before we let you all enjoy the rest of your day.
I hope you haven't discussed this already. The 57th Street Sanitation Garage, which is, I guess, on your list, and I just wanted to know specifically what's being done to it. You have beautiful art on it, which is appreciated, and I guess there are other issues. I didn't know what they are.
As you know, it's a very large building.
Very.
There are some envelope upgrades. I don't believe they'll impact the art. There's extensive HVAC upgrades. There's a building management system that will be installed. We'll be installing rapid roll-up doors so that the doors open and close quickly, so kind of preserve the heat in the space. So it's a very comprehensive retrofit.
All right. Second question, just quickly. I know you said that there are leases and rent is being paid on some of these vacant places. When it's a storefront, could you tell people that? Because it doesn't help the city to have this huge vacancy, and there are so many vacancies around the city. So when the city has one, it doesn't bode well for government. So I just didn't know if there's some way of indicating, don't worry, folks, we're getting money for this, or it's being rented, something. And I don't know if it's just around this area. I'm not talking about the offices upstairs. That's a whole different topic. I'm talking about the visual for the public to see that there's some movement. That was the list I was trying to get from IBO, and IBO said there was no such list. I'm just talking about vacancies, storefronts, or I know that over at the municipal building, those kiosks are owned by DOT and not you, as an example. But just generally for the public to have some sense, newsstands all over the place are vacant. I know the one out here is going to be part of the deliveristas. That's fine, or whatever it's going to be. But I'm just saying, let the public know. I don't know if that's something that you can do if you even have that list of the vacant storefronts.
Yeah, so I know that when we've had storefronts that were vacant that we've been prepping for auction, we do put up signage and a lot of advertising around just to get people interested in doing those auctions. And we recently just done an auction on 2 Lafayette. So on the Duane Street side, I believe hopefully we'll have a lease there soon. We also have worked with SBS, right, in some vacancies to sort of temporarily loan space for art and things like that. We've done that as well.
So Shama and everybody else.
Yeah, so we can engage with those that are leased and we not have yet seen movement to see what type of beautification they can do to see that something is eminently on its way.
Do you have such a list of vacant storefronts, not the offices, but do you have that list?
Yeah.
And could you provide it to the committee?
Within the DCAS portfolio,
Yeah,
we can certainly
DCAS,
put a
not
list
everybody else,
together.
just you. Right,
can.
you provide that to the
We'll
committee?
provide it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Brewer. I have been corrected. I have one final question. I apologize. Just at a high level, I understand we're on track to meet our FY27 reduction goal. The 2021 action plan had laid out a goal of hitting a 67% reduction by 2030. are we on track to hit that goal, or where do you think where are we anticipated to be at 2030?
We are actually going to hit it before 2030.
We're going to hit the 67% reduction before 2030.
I believe from our projections right now, yes.
Great.
I'm sorry, I have a cold.
No. We appreciate you being here. I have to say, I am just grateful for you all coming in to testify, answering questions directly. I thought this was a helpful and didactic conversation. I've certainly learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sana. Thank you, Stephen. Of
course,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. We are
you.
going to switch over to David Golden next. So I know the DCAS folks will be on their way. We have not one but two administration panels today. So with that, we're going to call up Mr. David B. Golden, who is representing the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And you know what? Councilmember Brannon is coming, so I know he has an opening. Does he have an opening? Do you know if he has an opening statement? I don't know. We're going to try to we're going to pause for 1 minute to give Justin a chance to join us. But get comfortable. Do whatever you're doing. I might take the chance to pee. We waited for the man, and here he is.
Just the right amount of time.
And I got a chance to pee. Do you have an opening statement? Sure. Great. Okay, we are reconvening. I just want to say, this is their testimony. I really love this bill that Councilmember Brannon has crafted. And when I had the privilege of being appointed as chair of this committee, the first conversation I had with the kind of oath administrator, oath commissioner, was about how eager I was to try to explore this. And even when I worked in the de Blasio administration, talked about how great an idea this was and was really excited that Councilmember Brannon was pushing for it. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our finance chair for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Ressler. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, this bill is about fairness and common sense. You hear that a lot, but this time we mean it. If you leave your garbage out too early or your music's on too loud, the fine is the same whether you make $30,000 a year or you make $300,000 a year. A $250 ticket might wreck one family's budget, but for someone else, it's pocket change. So I don't see that as a deterrence. It's dysfunction, and this is a situation where equality is not equity. The goal of civil fines is ultimately to change behavior, not to punish poverty. Yet we have over $1 billion in unpaid fines and fees, as Gail has noted, sitting on the city books, and no one's ever really studied why that might be the case. Maybe it's not that people won't pay. Maybe it's that they can't. And this pilot would certainly help us find out. If fines were scaled more fairly in line with income, more people might actually pay them, and we'd get better compliance in the process. I wish I could take full credit for this idea, but like a lot of good artists borrow, great artists steal, other cities have shown that this works. Even Staten Island tried a version of this years ago and saw positive results. Our proposal is limited to a pilot to test what's possible, to see if we can make enforcement smarter, fairer, more effective. So when agencies say this can't be done, what they're really saying is we don't want to even try. We already tailor our taxes, rent relief, and payment plans to income. I believe we can do the same for fines. And this is ultimately about making the system fairer for everyone and finally learning what actually works. If we're trying to change behavior, we should be doing that, and right now we're not. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Brannon, and it is now my pleasure to turn it over to the Administrative Justice Coordinator for the City of New York, David Golden.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Ressler and members of the committee. My name is David Golden. I serve, as noted, as Administrative Justice Coordinator in the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. You have my written testimony, but if I may, I'd like to just briefly summarize that. As a neutral and independent adjudicative body, Oath cannot take a position on proposed legislation or policy. I am therefore addressing concerns about Intro 551. In 2019, I testified about a previous legislative proposal to implement a day fines pilot program at Oath, and my testimony today reiterates concerns raised then. As background, please bear in mind that the Council took a significant step to promote fairness and equity in enforcement of city health and safety regulations when it enacted the Criminal Justice Reform Act of 2016, which Mokche supported and helped frame. CJRA created the option of civil summonses returnable to Oath for low-level offenses previously sent to criminal court. CJRA reduced criminal summonses for those offenses by more than 90%. For offenses adjudicated at Oath under CJRA, respondents found liable can participate in an educational module instead of paying any penalty at all. More than 1 in 5 individuals found liable for CJRA violations choose the educational module. The Council took another step to increase fairness and equity with Local Law 80 of 2021. That law put in place wide-ranging reductions in penalties for violations starting in 2023. Penalties were reduced for many of the violations that had been under consideration for the day fines pilot program proposed in 2019. It's been suggested that reducing penalties means increasing revenue. The theory is that if it's easier for respondents to afford penalties, they're more likely to pay. Experience with Local Law 80, however, refutes that suggestion. Revenue from the summonses affected by the law dropped significantly in and after 2023. Against that background, I have these comments on Intro 551. Oath is a complex agency that annually processes over 1 million civil summonses issued by over 24 enforcement agencies. On an average day, Oath conducts more than 700 hearings. Oath's efficient management of that staggering caseload is a testament not only to the agency's dedicated staff, but to the integrated set of rules, processes, and systems that keeps it running smoothly. Requiring oath to adopt a day fines pilot program along the lines specified in the intro would wreak operational havoc on oath. To have hearing officers verify income and base penalties on that income determination will require a bifurcated hearing process, one hearing to determine liability and a second separate hearing to verify income and determine penalty. That two-step process will be necessary to avoid claims of bias by respondents found in violation. Requiring income verification as part of penalty determination will also entail extensive IT reprogramming of already antiquated systems, new rulemaking, increased time to complete a hearing, increased number of hearings, and delays in issuance of decisions. All of that will impact every respondent waiting for a hearing and a decision. The proposed legislation doesn't make clear whether it applies only to summonses issued to natural persons or if it also applies to business entities. Intro 551 does define a day fine as a penalty based on a respondent's daily disposable income. Since a daily disposable income implies an individual, not a business, the apparent intent is to apply it only to natural persons. But when enforcement agencies issue summonses and file them with oath, there's no distinction between those issued to natural persons and those issued to business entities. More work would be needed to determine if and how summonses could be isolated for natural persons. A respondent's participation in the pilot program should be optional, not mandatory. A respondent should never be forced to disclose their income as a requirement to contest a violation. And a respondent who simply wants to pay a violation without contesting it, an option chosen for convenience by many people who receive enforcement summonses, should not be unnecessarily prevented from doing so by a requirement to submit income information. A pilot program cannot raise penalties beyond those already set forth in local law or rule. Increasing a penalty beyond the limits set by law would require legislation, not general delegation by the council to agencies to impose otherwise unauthorized penalties. And increasing already authorized penalties to take respondents' incomes into consideration would interfere with ensuring that participation is voluntary. We understand it is not intended to include in the pilot program offenses that were moved to oath as part of the CJRA. That should be made explicit by incorporating language into the intro clarifying that CJRA offenses are not included. As I mentioned earlier, individuals found in violation for those offenses can avoid paying any penalty altogether by enrolling in an educational module. The availability of this option mitigates concerns about economic inequity. The traditional day fine model was developed in a criminal rather than civil enforcement context. That model may be too procedurally complex and time-consuming with respect to summonses returnable to oath. It is critical that nothing in legislation dictate a pilot program that would disrupt oath's operations, require significant new technology and additional resources, increase defaults, or give rise to public confusion. A pilot program must not undermine efficiencies that oath, the Department of Finance, and enforcement agencies have achieved through the introduction of universal summons and standardized processing of both uncontested and contested summonses. I want to underscore that oath is and must remain a neutral and independent entity. Oath should not be charged with responsibility for designing and implementing penalty schedules for a day fines pilot program. It shouldn't be required to assess the success or shortcomings of such a program. The enforcement agencies would have to play the leading role in that effort. MOCJ is prepared to support them in working with other city agencies such as the Department of Finance, Law Department, and Office of Management and Budget, whose input would also be necessary. MOCJ is also prepared to coordinate the reporting and analysis of the pilot program. As appropriate to a neutral adjudicative agency, oath should be responsible only for reporting data concerning the outcomes of summonses it hears. And I would just add, if I may, the point that it should be clear that there has been extensive work done on analyzing uncollected debt generated by enforcement agency summonses, especially those at the Environmental Control Board and elsewhere at the Hearings Division at Oath. This has been a subject of study for city agencies going back literally for decades. I started as Administrative Justice Coordinator in 2006. We had a report that was prepared by McKinsey, consulting with the Department of Finance, the Mayor's Office of Operations, and a host of other city agencies that looked at the structure of ECB debt then. There has been much work done by city agencies since. I'd specifically reference a DOI report in 2020. And of course, there is the annual report that the council receives from the Department of Finance on ECB, that is oath adjudicated debt, which is due on November 1 of every year. So you'll be receiving that, as I'm sure you're aware, next week.
Thank you very much. How should I refer to the Administrative Justice Coordinator? Mr. Coordinator, Mr. Golden, what would you prefer?
Mr. Golden is fine.
Great. I will invite my colleagues to begin and then jump in from there. I know Councilmember Brandon has questions, followed by Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you, Chair. So oath already considers hardship and ability to pay in some cases, right? So why would formalizing this through income-based tiers be any different in some adjudications?
Well, it's considered in one specific context at oath, and then it's considered, or you could say it's considered by the Department of Finance. So let's go through what that entails. At oath, after there is a finding of liability, if a respondent takes an appeal, there is a process for the respondent to submit a hardship application, the point of which, if the application is granted, is to permit the respondent not to pay the penalty imposed while the appeal is pending. So it's a simple binary process, yes, no, and the only question is, should the penalty be paid during the pendency of the appeal? That simple process is unlike what we're typically talking about when we talk about a day fine, where there is going to be a calibration of a fine to the respondent's or the criminal defendant's income. And the outcome for the hardship exception is simply that if the appeal is granted and the finding of liability is set aside, then obviously the respondent doesn't have to pay anything. And if the finding below is upheld, they pay the penalty at that point rather than while the appeal is pending. Separate and apart from that, there is a process when we get to the collections aspect of this for a respondent who has had a finding of liability in the imposition of a penalty to communicate with the Department of Finance and to demonstrate that it would be a hardship for them to pay the entire penalty at that time, and this could apply to a business. This is not necessarily confined to an individual. And there is the opportunity to work out an installment plan or negotiate appropriate terms given the demonstrated financial condition of the individual entity to be able to afford that payment. So in certain circumstances where there is typically, we're talking now about a very substantial penalty, we're often talking about a commercial respondent, and we're talking about, and I think this is the key point, communication with the Department of Finance, not oath. There are circumstances there where there is that opportunity. But that's very different from what's being discussed in terms of a day fine pilot, which would be applied across the board to all of the respondents, at least the way that it's conceived in the intro, for certain violation categories, would be handled at oath, would require the submission of income information and whatever other information was going to be relevant to determining disposable income as part of that initial process.
So Oath already interfaces with DOF on collections and payment plans, right?
Yes.
So couldn't that same framework be leveraged here?
Well, not as part of the hearing process, they don't. I mean, when the process is concluded and there is a finding of liability, there is a communication with finance in the sense that if there hasn't been payment, then that goes to, when payment is made through finance, and if there hasn't been payment, then finance is the agency which is responsible for pursuing collections. Finance is also where somebody can make a payment initially if they don't want to contest the violation.
Yeah, I mean, we're not suggesting that would change. And I think it's fine if it's after, after there's a judgment on whether the person is guilty or not. That is when this would be decided, no?
Well, let me make sure I understand what you're suggesting. First of all, you're saying that you don't think that it would change, that somebody would be able to pay without contesting. Am I
No, I'm
understanding
saying,
correctly?
I'm saying, you're saying it's hard, it would be hard to do this in advance of the hearing. I'm saying that's fine. When the judgment is made, that is when we decide what the penalty would be.
So you're having two hearings, or you're having two processes,
Why?
because you've got to do the income determination and the determination of the penalty based on that.
But I'm saying, couldn't the income determination just be made based on the information that you access from DOF?
Sorry, what information from DOF? Let's go back a moment. Where is the respondent providing information to either oath or DOF?
How do you do it right now? How would you do that right now? If whether you're, for instance, something like SCREE or DRE or something like that, where there's parking ticket hardship plans and that kind of thing. How does the city right now find out someone's income?
All right, let's be clear. We're not talking about parking tickets at oath, obviously.
Right.
But
I'm just talking about in general, that the idea that right now the city clearly knows what people's income is because we have payment plans based on if people have the ability to pay.
not at oath. What I'm saying is that there is an opportunity after there has been an adjudication at oath for a respondent to go to the Department of Finance and work out a payment
Hardship,
plan
right.
if they can demonstrate that they don't have the ability to make the payment. And as I'm saying, those are typically cases in which there is a very significant penalty, and typically it's a business interest, which is showing that they are going to have difficulty being able to make that payment.
So if income verification is the barrier, would oath support a self-attestation model with random audits? It's used in other city programs.
You're assuming that this is voluntary, I take it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what you're saying is that at a hearing, somebody would come in, and this is going to be the initial hearing, or is this going to be a subsequent hearing for purposes of setting the penalty?
I mean, ideally, it would be at the same hearing.
All right. Well, then let's think about what we're saying, because we're talking now about somebody being told, you have to come in, you just got a ticket. You have to come into oath. And first of all, you are going to be, if you are contesting the ticket, saying that you did not, in fact, put out your garbage outside of the required hours. Now you're being told that you also have to be prepared at that same hearing to discuss your income, to discuss how much you're paying if we're calculating disposable income for rent, food, healthcare, whatever other factors may go into that. The more complicated the process is for a respondent, if there's anything we know about what causes defaults, the more complicated that process is, the greater the likelihood that there's going to be a default. Because the more stress you are putting on somebody who is coming in to appear at a hearing, typically representing themselves if we're talking about an individual, the more it's a challenge for them to be prepared and to come in to present the case. Moreover, to say to somebody that is part of their basic presentation saying, I didn't do it, they also have to be prepared to talk about their income, is now creating a separate challenge for them. So let's say that we're not going to do it at the initial hearing. Suppose we're going to have another hearing. If we go that route, then there has to be an explanation to the respondent that there are going to be these two separate steps, And if that is a topic that's being introduced only at the hearing, then the hearing officer who is reviewing liability has to have a separate explanation for the respondent saying, understand that if I find that you actually did put the trash out during the wrong period of time, there will have to be, or there may be another hearing at which you will have an opportunity to provide information about your income and what your expenses are, and at that time a penalty will be determined. It's going to be a much more complicated process.
Yeah, I'm not
And I
denying
just
that.
want to
don't think-
flag again the fact that we have experience dealing with the economic impact of these penalties, and that's been addressed by this council through introducing in CJRA an alternative to payment of any penalty, and in Local Law 80 through significantly reducing the level of these penalties. And those are options that can be considered again because we want to avoid making a more complicated process that's going to impose additional burdens and create the risk of confusion for respondents.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we do away with the hardship program, and I appreciate that that exists for folks that have the inability to pay, but that doesn't change what we're after here. Is there a specific statutory or technical barrier that would prevent Oath from running a limited pilot on something like this?
I'm assuming you're talking now only about lowering penalties, not increasing them.
No, I'm talking about the bill. I'm talking about the idea we have to attach the fine to your income. Is there a statutory or
increasing? Yes, there's a problem with statute because you can't authorize increased penalties beyond what the statutes already provide for.
Did you review at all the pilot that was done in the 90s in Staten Island?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with that.
Okay,
That was in a criminal court context. That was not obviously dealing with civil penalties.
Everything I read on it was that it was a success.
I think there are a lot of, it's been discussed obviously extensively in academic literature and reviewed by a lot of people who write about these kinds of things. I think that at that time, and obviously that was, 37 years ago, it was innovative. I think that for misdemeanors as an alternative to custodial supervision, which was a primary focus of it, it certainly led in the right direction. And obviously we've built a lot on that in the city since then in the approach that we have taken to how misdemeanors are handled. Obviously there was a consideration being given before the program was terminated to extending it to felonies. That didn't happen. Evaluations I've seen of it have suggested that it may, but it's not clear, have resulted in more collections. But it was not primarily designed to try to increase revenue, and that was not the focus either of the program or analyses of it. And in the work that I've seen on it, the point has been made that in analyzing the revenue implications in any event, you've got to take into consideration the additional administrative burden. So it's not enough just to say, if you can isolate what was being collected in penalties, that went up. You've also, assuming it did, you've also got to consider that it became a more expensive process because judges had to elicit more information from defendants and had to spend more time considering that impact. One other thing I just want to say about that, it's very important in the way that Oath operates that we achieve consistency across handling of similar violations for similarly situated respondents. A great deal of time and effort has gone into creating a universal summons and making sure that throughout Oath adjudications, hearing officers are, as much as possible, producing the same results for respondents who are in the same situation. The downside of creating individually tailored remedies is that inevitably you are going to create more instances in which similarly situated people are being treated differently. That's going to create concerns about fairness. It's going to expand appeals. And it's, again, going to introduce a complication into a system where there's, I think, a real question about whether that's necessary to address issues that you've raised, as opposed to expanding CJRA and the like.
I think you might be selling oath a little short, right? I think you already handle some very complex adjudications on a daily basis. And what we're after here is the idea that flat fines ultimately punish the poor, but they barely register for the wealthy. So I would argue that the current system is inequitable greatly. I understand, and I believe that just because that's the way we do it doesn't mean that that's the best way or that's the way we should continue doing it. I guess my question, and I don't want to go on all day, but what resources or staffing would make this workable for Oath rather than saying it's impossible, we can't do it? What would you need to do this?
I mean, we would have to get back to you with specifics, but it's clear that there would be a need for substantial additional technology. There would be a need for additional training. There would be a need to work with the enforcement agencies to have them do additional training. I think that if we were talking about it the way that it's been framed in Intro 551, it's hard to see how that specific approach could be captured within the universal summons that we now have. And if we are going to be disrupting the universal summons and going back to undo a process that's been years in the making to try to ensure standardization and uniformity across agency operations, that has tremendous ramifications in terms of record keeping, data management, how processes would be standardized. We could get back to the council with a more detailed cost estimate of what the consequences would be. But I think that it would be a very substantial undertaking, even for a pilot program, because it would be departing from the kind of uniformity and standardization that Oath has achieved.
Last question for me. Could you tell us how much unpaid civil fine debt we currently have?
I don't recall off the top of my head. As I said, you'll be getting that report from the Department of Finance next week, and I can refer you back to the report from last year, which I have here, but I'm...
Well, I mean, what was the most recent Oath's current fine collection rate? What was it?
I just don't recall offhand. It's in that report.
Okay.
We can get that for you, or you can...
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to Councilmember Brannon for the thoughtful questions and Mr. Golden for the helpful responses. With that, Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much. I like Brandon and I like Wessler, but I am not convinced that this is the best idea. So my other question, though, is Andrew Richey, who's a technologist, had a long op-ed in the Daily News this week just about the fact that technology is challenging in the city of New York. And we're all trying to figure out how to get these fines paid. One way Councilmember Brandon suggested is different levels of income being responsive. But my feeling is that it's not so easy to pay these fines. My husband fights everything. So he goes down because his eyes are bad, the computer doesn't work, so he goes down to fight. And yet, I think a lot of people would prefer to use much more technology, 24 hours a day, et cetera. So it's not really bill related, but it is. The last report that I did with IBO, it was $2.1 billion in unpaid, and it wasn't but 3 or 4 agencies. It wasn't all of the agencies. And then I talked to Commissioner of Finance all the time about this, and they have collection agencies, and I don't know how much they cost. I don't know how much they bring in. He thinks they are cost effective, but people still just don't pay. And so I guess my question is there a other solution? Because I think Councilmember Brennan is also trying to get at this. People got to pay. And if it's a situation where you have a hardship because you can't pay, is that working? What can we do? Because these numbers are escalating, I think.
Well,
I think technology would help, again, without being specific. Andrew Roche has some good ideas.
Yeah, no, he does. And I appreciate his thoughts on it. I've worked with him in the past in other contexts. I think that the situation is improving. That's why I keep referring to those Department of Finance reports, because I think that as this
We'll look at
issue
it.
has been studied over the years, there have been a number of approaches to addressing it, and progress has been made. But I think that the overall question of the outstanding debt needs to be understood in terms of its full complexity, because it's not just about people not paying because the penalties are too high or even because they're scofflaws. Going back to a summary back in 2020 of what the Department of Finance had been identifying then as key drivers of the uncollectability of the debt, they include respondent companies no longer in business or have declared bankruptcy, individual respondents have died, property owner respondents have relocated, properties held by LLCs make it difficult for finance to aggregate the overall outstanding debt, outside collection agencies lack legal enforcement authority to effectively collect on the debt, summonses are written illegibly, summonses not properly served on the respondent. Finally, approximately 80% of summonses referred to DOF for collection arise from default judgments. So a couple of things there. One is very important to avoid defaults. If there is anything we've learned from this process, it's that allowing people to pay quickly soon as they have received a violation that they are not contesting or a finding of liability if they did contest is critical. Once people have lost the thread, once things have been delayed, people have had difficulty figuring out what to do, the likelihood of a default increases dramatically, and once you're into a default, it's very hard to collect. About the summonses being written illegibly or not properly served or the respondent not being properly identified, that's why it's critical to have uniformity and standardization of operations, because since finance addressed the conclusions that I just mentioned 5 years ago, a lot of work has gone into trying to standardize processes so that technology can be deployed, so that we can get a correct identification of the respondent homeowner, let's say, or property owner or managing agent, and properly serve the violation. That's where we have an opportunity, or the enforcement agencies do, at the outset of the process to avoid the complications that downstream are going to make it more difficult to collect the debt.
And I don't know enough about what is or is not available technologically. I do know that the police department is horrific. Horrific. You cannot get anything but paper from them. If you have to make a complaint about some kind of a bicycle accident, for instance, is all paper. And good luck in getting the paper. I have to call constantly to get paper from the police department. You can't call, you have to go. So I hope that's not true elsewhere. That is unbelievable. I mean, they must have stacks to the ceiling. So, I mean, I'm just saying, and I assume you can pay all of these things 24/7, online. But, if you want to contest it, I assume it's not as easy. I'm just saying that technology has to improve. That's a big challenge to all of this. But the police department is just mind-blowing. We've been complaining about it for years. So I hope other agencies are not as challenging. The best example I have is all over the city, it's the guy who's moving, it's the guy with the sanitation. You can't find that guy. I went looking for him. You can't find these people, and it must be millions of dollars. So when you say this list of you can't get the LLCs, for God's sake, we should be able to find the LLCs and some of these other things on your list I know you're addressing, but it does seem very slow, I have to tell you, the addressing.
Well, I read that list to say that's where the Department of Finance identified issues 5 years ago. Those are the issues we've been working on. That's why there's been
How
improvement.
much they've addressed. Okay. All right, I'm just saying that if the goal is to collect, then we have some work to do, and if there may be some other cities that Councilmember Brennan has suggested that we could look at, I don't quite know how you would do that, the thing with the income. I mean, some people send somebody down, lawyers, friends, colleagues, and I don't know how that would work in terms of their income, because they're not going to know their friend's income, et cetera. So I don't quite know how that would work. But that's my question. Technology and Andrew Roche. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Brewer. I keep wanting to call you Chair Brewer from your distinguished time leading this
Give
committee.
me a break. Give me a break.
You go. You don't want to break, Gail. Come on.
I do not.
Can I just, before I ask a couple questions about the bill, and I think you've been peppered sufficiently, but what is the role of the Administrative Justice Coordinator? I don't mean that rudely. I really don't.
No, it's a fair question. The role of the Administrative Justice Coordinator, per the executive order that created the office, which is 20 years ago, is to work with the city's administrative tribunals on areas of shared concern. And at the time, and I don't want to go into a whole history lesson unless
I'm interested.
you invite
but
me.
Brief history is great.
Okay, well, you can tell me to stop when you're tired of it. At the time that the office was created, there was not a single central hearings division at Oath. Oath existed, obviously, and had responsibility
that was before the merger
for
with DCA at the time.
Right. So the first thought was that across all of these different tribunals located within various agencies, the Environmental Control Board was part of DEP.
Right.
Taxi and Limousine Commission had their own tribunal. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene had their own tribunal. What was then the Department of Consumer Affairs had their own tribunal, et cetera. The idea was that we wanted to standardize processes and make sure that everybody was living up to various kinds of criteria, one of which was having a set of rules of conduct for administrative law judges and hearing officers, and that was actually something that was incorporated into the charter by referendum in 2005. So the first order of business for the Administrative Justice Coordinator was to work with the tribunals on doing that, and that's been in place for the past 20 years. But in addition to that, we then started to look at ways in which we could improve the functioning of the tribunals. And to make a long story short, one of the obvious, in retrospect anyway, conclusions was if you want to have an agency tribunal with hearing officers conducting hearings and making findings of liability, functioning at a high professional level, it should not be located within an enforcement agency that has an interest in winning cases. It should be located within the city's independent, neutral, central adjudicative body. So moving initially the Environmental Control Board from DEP to Oath was the start of that process. That was around 2008. That led to the creation of the Hearings Division at Oath, and then that led to the transfer of the other enforcement agency-based tribunals that I was mentioning. So that was really what the Office of Administrative Justice Coordinator focused on at that time.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I really appreciate it, and I didn't realize that you were so central to that. Consolidation and standardization is helpful to understand, and good work that's happened over 20 years that I think is very beneficial for the city of New York and for New Yorkers. Policy-wise, we've seen this phenomenal increase in summons issued during the Adams administration. Double the number of summons have been issued since when the mayor came into office compared to FY25. Over 1,100,000 summons. I find it to be a very concerning policy trend. Do you, in the Administrative Justice Coordinator, in Oath likes to say that they don't look at these issues, they just process what comes in and don't have an opinion or a perspective. As the Administrative Justice Coordinator, do you have an opinion or perspective on the phenomenal increase in summons that are being issued to New Yorkers? How do we explain these trends? What should we do to reverse them?
No, I don't have an opinion. I mean, I'm not in a position to be able to say what the enforcement strategies are. Obviously, there are a lot of different things that drive those issuances. And I think that from the standpoint of the operation of the tribunals, which is what I am concerned with, the issue really is with making sure that the processes continue to be efficient, that people continue to have an opportunity to contest those violations, and that those who are making use of the system, whether they are making a payment, contesting, or just finding out information about it, are able to do that without impediment.
I appreciate the responsibility to ensure that the process is fair, but is there not a similar responsibility to ensure that city agencies are issuing summons in a fair way and enforcing fairly? It strikes me that this isn't a situation where it's just the health department going rogue and issuing summons to every New Yorker that they come across. This is something we're seeing it across the board. The health department, the sanitation department, DEP, NYPD, they're all taking a far more aggressive and expansive approach to enforcement. And it's a deeply troubling trend that I can't imagine is not a deliberate policy decision. In your capacity, do you look at kind of how are agencies handling this more aggressive enforcement approach, and could that be done in a more fair and equitable way, or is that not in the purview? I'm not trying to be a jerk and asking the question.
No. It's a fair question, but it's really not within my purview. I mean, I think you look at outcomes in terms of contested violations at oath, and if you saw a radical difference in terms of the number of violations being dismissed, that might be a basis for concern. But I think that what we've seen over the years is a relatively consistent pattern in terms of those cases that are contested. The enforcement agencies continue to prevail a little more than half the time. And I think that that's, consistent with what we would expect of a fair system from the standpoint of what the enforcement agencies are trying to achieve.
Have you considered working with Oath to analyze, are there specific city workers that are disproportionately issuing summons, and is that something that would be a trend that would be worth evaluating?
I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean, but I will say that we have looked at the issuance patterns, because we do have data that show for individual inspectors down to the level of the individual inspector, the location, the violation being issued patterns. And I don't think that the concern is so much that you have hyper-aggressive individuals. I think the question more has to do with the quality of the issuance. I mean, the concern would be that somebody is issuing violations that are disproportionately defective. If somebody's issuing violations that are correct in being upheld because they are properly identifying instances in which somebody is behaving in a way that violates the ad code, that's generally, I think, not regarded as something which is a problem. If somebody's issuing violations that are disproportionately being thrown out because they weren't properly, that's an issue, and I think the data on that and working with agencies to make sure that there's appropriate accountability and training and increasing the use of handhelds, and that's why I've been talking about standardization, to make sure that those who are writing, that agents who are writing the violations know what they're doing and are doing it properly, is an area of concern.
And do you think New Yorkers, in a sense, kind of I'll preface by saying, I think that the consolidation of the tribunals has been a good thing for the city. But just to ask the question, do you think that New Yorkers have lost a mechanism of accountability to DEP or DOHMH in that they're no longer the ones processing these summons and dealing with these violations? Is that a concern that you have, or do you think that's unfair?
I would not view it as a concern. I mean, I think that if you receive a violation from an agency, what you want is to be able to go to some neutral third party, and you're persuaded that they're wrong. They said that you put the trash out too early and you're sure that you didn't. I think you want to go to a neutral third party to hear your side of the story and make a determination, not go back to the agency that issued the violation and try and persuade them. And I don't think that any sense of being involved with the very people who wrote the violation is going to offset that concern. I will, however, say this, and I think it's something that we have preserved. There does need to be the opportunity, where appropriate, for the respondent to be in communication with the agency that wrote the violation, because that enters into having, for example, a cure. Or having a settlement. So there are certainly instances in which there is going to be direct communication between a respondent and, say, DOB, because they've gotten a violation for a certain condition and it's one that they can cure, and they want to be able to talk to DOB directly to say, does this remedy, I brought in the plumber or whatever it is, and did the following work that was required on the NOV, does that satisfy you? Yes, that's appropriate, but that's outside the adjudicative context.
And on this legislation, I appreciate the thoughtful testimony and feedback. Do you think there is a path to conducting a pilot, relatively narrow, but a pilot that could evaluate income and assess fees accordingly? Do you think it is feasible for us to do this?
I'd have strong concerns, as suggested, about that kind of a pilot because of the ramifications for oath and because it seems like a more complicated way of getting to address a concern that can be handled otherwise. There is the opportunity to expand the CJRA approach if we have concerns that there are certain violations that are onerous for individuals. If we go back to the example given in the article, in the op-ed, which Member Brannon started with, if you leave your trash out too early, you may wind up with a ticket. And does that put you in a position where you've got to choose between paying the city and paying the rent? Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to note that I think that in most instances, very close to all, that ticket is being written to a property owner, a homeowner, not to a tenant. So we're not talking about the rent, but even allowing that it could happen with a tenant or that it could be a burden for a homeowner. If that's an issue, then giving the recipient of that ticket the opportunity to participate in an educational module and pay nothing, which is something that we can do without creating all of the issues or addressing all of the problems that we've been flagging in this testimony, seems like the more attractive option. If it's mandatory, or if it's something that the council views as being the highest priority to do something to bring income into the picture, we would suggest, going back to the hardship exception that was mentioned earlier, that using eligibility for a benefits program that's means tested is the proxy that allows you to identify individuals without getting into the details of income information. The objection to the day fines program that I'm trying to articulate is the need to calibrate it specifically to income with the complexity of calculations that is involved in looking at disposable income and the sensitivity around providing information concerning income, especially if we're talking about documentation, especially in an environment in which we want to be very careful about asking people to provide sensitive personal information. Being able to have a carve-out where we could say, here are some individuals who would be financially stressed and we want to protect them from that, that's the kind of thing that we think it would make more sense to focus on.
Okay. You know, I think that the spirit of this legislation that is compelling is that there's an equity lens and that, you know, the goal of issuing a violation, I think, is to impose a degree of accountability and optimally change behavior moving forward. And for the person who can afford to pay a little bit more and that may be a more effective way to tweak, modify, deter moving forward versus the person who has a hardship and cannot. And that ideally it could lead to not only better outcomes in our neighborhoods, but also higher rates of revenue collection, which I know you have raised concerns about in your testimony. But, you know, when DOF is reporting a collection rate on violations of something like 55.4%, something isn't working. And there are improvements that are needed there. I recognize that's outside of the purview of your role, but I think an important reality that we need to reckon with. Any other questions from you? You good? Thank you very much, Mr. Golden, for coming in. We appreciate your thoughtful testimony.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Great. We have one more panel, I believe. We're going to have 4 in person and somebody on Zoom. And it's a great panel, so thank you all for your patience. Zachary Katz-Nelson from the Independent Rikers Commission. David Ansell from Save the Sound. Sorry. Eric Goldstein from the Natural Resources Defense Center, NRDC, and Darren Mack from Freedom Agenda, which I believe just celebrated an anniversary. Congratulations to the Freedom Agenda on that anniversary. Did we just lose Darren? He's coming back. All right, we didn't lose Darren for long. Was it 5 years? Is that right? 5 years? It's amazing. Congrats. I was sorry to miss it. All right, why don't we begin? And do we have somebody on Zoom, or did they leave? They're still there? What's her name? M. Ruby. Oh, and we have M. Ruby on Zoom, who formerly worked in Council District 33. We'll start with Mr. Katz-Nelson and make our way if that works. 3 minutes, I think, on this one, if that's okay. 3. Thanks so much.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing. I'm Zachary Katz-Nelson, Executive Director of the Independent Rikers Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to testify. Thank you for your co-sponsorship of the Renewable Rikers Master Planning Bill. Thank you, Councilmember Brewer, as well, for co-sponsoring the bill. Councilmember Brandon, hopefully you'll be joining shortly. So our commission is in strong favor of the planning bill, master planning for renewable Rikers. And we our commission looked at dozens of possible uses for the island over the course of the years, and most of them are absolutely they're just not feasible. Rikers is 80% decaying landfill. It's isolated. It's polluted and loud because it's so close to LaGuardia. There just aren't reasonable options. And as Commissioner Molina said, this is a generational opportunity to really transform the landscape environmentally, justice-wise, and economically for the city. The feasibility studies back up. This is an excellent idea, and it will save the city billions of dollars that we would otherwise have to spend propping up these failing, aging sewage treatment plants. But they also offer a really transformative opportunity in council member districts like Councilmember Ariola's district, right? The sewage treatment plant there that she has, Talman Island. Imagine a different future where you can move that onto Rikers and open up the possibility for community-based development there, something far better than foul sewing treatment and marred waterways, to say the least, when the rain comes down and the sewers can't handle everything. But there's also the opportunity for coordination. You mentioned this, the idea of why master planning is so critical. First of all, we're leaving those vacant 42-plus acres on the island right now. That is megawatts of solar power, for instance, that we're just leaving on the table, right? JATC, that's 400-plus thousand square feet that could be used for something else, something far better. But the idea there are other projects in the city right now. There's a fossil fuel-based power plant on Rikers Island that the city is asking to increase the allowable emissions from the state, right? How much of that could we replace with solar power on the island? They're also looking at, there's a sewage overflow tunnel that's having to be built under state demand in Flushing Bay that could be coordinated with the Rikers Island Renewable Rikers Plan, but is not right now because there's not the power, the push from City Hall to say, coordinate all these projects. That's $1 billion plus project we're talking about in Bowery Bay. Why are we not working together on all these pieces and these opportunities there? We know you understand this, but the rationale behind master planning is it should be obvious, hopefully, for people that are really studying this. Hopefully, I'm glad to hear very much so the administration is now supportive of this effort. And hopefully we can reach resolution and pass the bill in the coming months. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is David Ansel. I'm the Vice President of Water Protection for the Center for Water Protection at Save the Sound. We are a non-for-profit organization that protects and restores the Long Island Sound. And just, I don't know what your geography knowledge is, but the Long Island Sound is very much in New York City, in the Bronx and Queens, and then moves all the way out into Connecticut to the Rhode Island border. So Rikers Island falls squarely within the Long Island Sound in the Western Narrows. Some people call it the Upper East River. We call it the Western Narrows of the Long Island Sound. We are very excited about renewable Rikers, and we enthusiastically support 1038 and the master plan concept. We want to thank Councilmember Nurse and the 12 other council members for sponsoring this important bill. 1038 would require the Department of Citywide Administrative Services to create a master plan regarding the future use of Rikers Island for sustainability and resilience purposes once the jails are closed. Such a plan is crucial in preparing the city to move forward in a way that will restore water quality in New York City and maximize the environmental benefits of renewable Rikers Island. So obviously a lot of potential benefit also for carbon reduction, renewable energy, but I do want to focus on water quality for another minute or so. In 2026, Save the Sound will be releasing our new report card, which includes science and data-driven grades for water quality in the open waters of the Long Island Sound. Our data goes back to 2008, and every year the Western Narrows has received an F. There's a lot of work to be done to reduce the massive nitrogen pollution problem that is hindering the ecological health of the waters of the Western Narrows. We know where the pollution is coming from. The feasibility study released last year by the Department of Environmental Protection acknowledges it in the document. More than half of the city is served by a combined sewer system carrying both stormwater and sewage that was not designed to handle the large volume of water generated during today's heavy rainstorms, resulting in the discharge of this untreated wastewater directly into the city's waterways. We're talking about 21 billion gallons of raw sewage every year. The single greatest opportunity to minimize that pollution is a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment facility on Rikers Island, decreasing the burden on the 4 existing plants that surround Rikers, 3 of which will hit their 90th birthdays during the next mayoral administration. The development of such an essential facility will be complicated and expensive, but it will require years of planning before the first shovel goes into the ground. 1038 would launch the process of planning for the most important investment New York City can make in restoring water quality in the waterways in our lifetimes. We urge the City Council to move forward on 1038 to help reduce carbon and create renewable energy and improve New York City's water quality for New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chair Ressler. Thank you for your leadership in holding this hearing, and good afternoon, Councilmember Brannan as well. I'm Eric Goldstein, New York City Environment Director at the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm also a member of the Rikers Island Advisory Committee. NRDC strongly supports Intro 1038. We believe this is among the most important pieces of environmental legislation that is before the council as it prepares to close out this term at year's end. And it's also the best opportunity in years to create a green jobs producing modern infrastructure redevelopment initiative for our city and all New Yorkers. There's a lot of talk these days over the timing of Rikers closure, but often overlooked are the multiple environmental and economic benefits expected to flow from the redevelopment of Rikers as a green jobs producing oasis of environmental infrastructure. City studies support this conclusion. The DEP study released in March of 2024 noted that a modern wastewater treatment plant on Rikers could transform DEP's operations, would be technically feasible, and likely similar in cost to the needed rehabilitation of the city's nearby aging plants. Another study released by the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice found that a major solar installation, battery storage, and offshore wind converter station presents a feasible and compelling alternative to the city's current antiquated energy infrastructure. An analysis prepared by NRDC by former Sanitation Commissioner Brendan Sexton concluded that the major food and yard waste composting facility on Rikers was both feasible and necessary to achieve the city's ambitious climate goals. But since the completion of these studies, nothing has happened. The Adams administration has failed to take any meaningful steps forward. It was encouraging to hear the commissioner this morning talk about DCAS's seemingly expressions of support for Intro 1038, but it was distressing to hear the commissioner's statement that DCAS is acting as if it has no management over parcels of land already transferred and has taken no steps to advance interim uses that advance the resiliency and sustainability purposes set forth in the Renewable Rikers Statute. The Rikers Island Advisory Committee has, under the Adams administration, only been convened occasionally, reluctantly, and at least that's been the vibe from the Department of Corrections, and seemingly only with a desire to utilize, seemingly without a desire to utilize the expertise of the public members or to move the council's vision of renewable Rikers forward. Intro 1038, spearheaded by Sandy Nurse, is the next logical step. A friendly amendment we recommend is that the final bill require a master plan to also provide for the construction of a major composting facility on the scale of the city's existing Fresh Kills composting operation. In short, preparation of an official city master plan as provided for by Intro 1038 is what is needed to turn an island of shame into a showplace of sustainability for all New Yorkers. Thank you. for your attention.
Eric, thank you for the thoughtful testimony, and I want to thank you for helping my team and I figure out max indoor temp policy stuff. So I just am always appreciative of NDRC's expertise. We really thank you.
Terrific. We're excited about that.
Yeah, me too. And Darren, you missed me saying congratulations on 5 years. What you all have accomplished in a relatively short time is pretty extraordinary, and it's always good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ressler and committee members. My name is Darren Mack, co-director of Freedom Agenda. We're grateful to the council for holding this hearing, and particularly for the opportunity to advance Intro 1038. We're proud partners in the Renewable Rikers Coalition. Our members are survivors of Rikers and impacted family members who are organizing to make sure that the era of jailing people on Rikers Island will end. But the future of the island is also important to us. Years ago, we began conversation with our members about how the island should be used once the jail is closed, and the clear demand we heard was that the land must be used in ways that start to repair the harm done to communities that have been targeted by mass incarceration. In many cases, these are the same communities that have been harmed by environmental racism. Realizing the incredible potential to use Rikers Island for green infrastructure while removing environmental burdens in our communities, we joined the environmental justice advocates to advocate for and ultimately pass 3 bills that we call the Renewable Rikers Act. One of our members, Marco Barrios, has been appointed to the Rikers Island Advisory Committee established by Local Law 1621 to guide the transition of Rikers Island for sustainable purposes. As a survivor of Rikers, he was thrilled to take on this position, but has been disappointed to find a lack of transparency and action from the higher levels of the administration. The advisory committee members requested permission to tour specific areas of Rikers that could be transferred to DCAS and were denied access by DOC. They've also found little coordination among agencies that could be working on this project, reflecting a lack of interest from City Hall leadership in advancing renewable Rikers. Despite the release of 2 official feasibility studies in March 2024 that detail the incredible potential of the Renewable Rikers Plan to address our city's sustainability goals and deliver further benefits to New Yorkers, like good jobs, the city has refused to move concretely forward on any aspect of this plan. They've even refused to transfer the Anna M. Cross Center, which has been vacant for more than 2 years, to the control of DCAS, along with other vacant parcels of land that should have been transferred. The council should not have to force this administration to move forward on a project that promises to deliver so much positive impact for our communities, but we're grateful you're prepared to do what's necessary. We don't know yet who the next mayor will be, but we do know that anyone holding that office will be bound by the legal and moral obligation to close Rikers Island and address the twin crises of climate change and environmental racism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. Really appreciate that testimony. I'm disappointed you didn't come in person, but it's good to have you at the committee. Are you with us? Did we lose M? Going once, going twice. Okay, I am going to take this opportunity to adjourn the hearing, unless you have any questions. Thank you all for your testimony. We really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Oh, we just adjourned. I'm so sorry, Chris. We'll get you next time.